The gift God placed in his hands was trapped between being no warrior and no sorcerer. And he didn't even have a healer. With one sharp, loud command to act, he snapped into motion, nodded, clenched the piggy bank tighter, gave it a quick shake, and braced himself to make his move. His stern, unshakable face screamed, "Bring it on, asterisk," and that confidence fueled every move as he unleashed the borrowed magic skill. A searing burst of light swallowed him whole and lit everything around him. The piggy bank's eyes blazed with fury, and a load that looked just like money blasted out of its hole so fast it could have scraped someone. Rent clutched the piggy bank like a shield, and as it left his hands, cash blasted out in a wild storm, spraying everywhere and swallowing up anything it could reach. The girl in the witch's hat will forgive him if he hurries, because that trinity battling the monster can't take any more, and they desperately need the help of Rinse magic. The paper money streaked toward the guy with the heavy sword, zipping so close it looked like it meant to strike his back. Then boom, it wasn't an attack at all, it was there to fuel him with fresh strength. They had a blast with the guy, moved like they belonged with him. Then he finally let out a huge sigh of relief. Suddenly, the knight clenched his sword even tighter and roared at the monsters, daring them to come at him. Fire flared in his eyes, and total victory felt guaranteed. He poured every last ounce of magic into one earth-shaking strike, then wham! A massive blast swallowed the monster whole, crushing its last hope of living. Rent got blasted by that brutal wind, snapped his eyes shut to shield himself. But the explosion hit even harder, sending the guy's hair flying everywhere and flinging dust and sand straight into Rent's eyes. Gaius stayed planted in the aftermath of his crushing win, chest heaving and breath ripping back in, gripping his sword like it was salvation as the dust settled from the explosion and hit him all at once. El, the senior healer, grinned and declared the knight was unbeatable. Guy, the senior warrior, matched his smile and let out a small chuckle, proud as ever, while Misei, the senior mage, leaned in and said this time victory would be easy. Rents dropped to the ground and stared at the heroes, a grin splitting his face. Winning with a single strike felt insanely cool to him. The piggy bank rested on his knee as the dust from the blast slowly drifted away. The company urges him to press on this route till the very end, so it can finally explain what Rent does for a living and what his profession is called. Protector of the Arcane. 5 years back in the sleepy little village of Alt, everything started to change. The little guy grins from ear to ear, waves the paper like it's a trophy, and yells that he's a swordsman. Like, seriously, how cool is that? The dudes beside him pumped him up, bragging that this was awesome. Then someone sniped that Guy was already a daring adventurer, and Guy shot back, proud as ever, "I always wanted to be an adventurer, and I finally got what I deserved." Goro stepped up, flashed his leaf, and announced he was a blacksmith. Guy grinned like crazy and said, "That's awesome." Then added, "And you're even an E rank." The boy vowed he'd battle with the weapon he'd forge, and the young blacksmith, heart heavy, admitted he'd wanted to chase adventure just as badly. When someone hits 15 in this world, they get a life-changing gift from God at a special coming-of-age ceremony. Little Rent grins and daydreams about becoming the strongest adventurer out there. Suddenly, a little girl pops up right beside him and snaps her head toward the guy, begging for his attention. Rent practically lit up when he spotted his friend Misei, and she told him that his name had been called out at church. Inside that church, the air felt creepy and electric at the same time. Big doors looming, towering columns, and people standing there with tree branches. It could stun anyone, but it would also send them running. Rent whipped his head around, stunned that literally everything in this place felt totally off and completely unfamiliar to him. He finally closed the distance to the man who beamed at the young guy with a gentle smile, calling him like he was speaking to a holy father. The man shoved the apartment deed into his hands and demanded he pray beneath the altar's blazing light. Then he claimed the creator would finally spill the secret of his whole future, and with tall windows stamped in angel patterns looming overhead, Rent pressed the parchment to his forehead and started praying, begging to know what his purpose in life really was. A bunch of teenagers crowded the church entrance. Some leaned in waiting for their friends, and others stared at the doors like their moment was about to explode. Rent burst out of the church, and Misei's face lit up as she rushed to him, asking if he'd finally finished. He couldn't stop smiling about how great he looked, and the moment he showed up, everyone bombarded him with questions about how things went, because they were dying to know what role he landed. Rent awkwardly scratched the back of his head, thrust his paper forward, and showed everyone that the Guardian of Magic had his name written on it. Then he said even the Holy Father looked stunned, like the roll read an S rank. The moment those words hit, everyone nearby snapped wide-eyed in shock. He nearly choked at the shock of getting such a high rank, swearing this kind of thing was practically unheard of. And right behind him, a crowd surged in, all desperate to get a look at Ren's leaf. He leaned in for a closer look, and that's when he realized the Keeper of Magic was right there. Without warning, his eyes snapped downward. Then he went dead quiet, thinking for a split second before he exploded, shouting that the guy's magic was 1,200 units. He snapped that it couldn't be true. His magic was just a 20, no way, and the girl beside him shot back that hers was only a 13. The guy started trembling and blurted, "What's your strength?" Then Rent shoved closer, ready to inspect for himself. He said his power was to lend magic, and the company right nearby just stared, totally lost on what that even meant. Rent said it probably came from a skill that lets you pass magical power to other people. But Guy snapped, "So you're telling me I can borrow your magic powers and use them anytime I want?" Misei popped up from behind and bragged that it was totally cool. Then the guy froze and jumped out of his skin because she'd appeared out of nowhere. She gushes that it's an incredible gift and then drops the bomb, "It's S-rank." Rent blurts out, "Are you sure you really believe that?" Mrs. beamed warmly and congratulated the guy with total, no-holds-barred sincerity. He flashed a shy smile and straight up thanked the girl because he really meant it. Borrowing from a magic keeper is one of his wild skills. He can tap into it to stash away a bit more magic power than normal. It's basically the name for how much power you burn every time you use a skill. When you rest or fall asleep, your drained magic powers up again on its own, but there's a hard ceiling on how much you can hold, so it can never refill past that limit. But he can stash all that extra power away in his magic storage. Its power tops out at 2100 units, exactly equal to its maximum magic output. Rent lay sprawled on his bed, eyes locked on the ceiling, wondering if he'd ever really be able to unleash his skills. He realizes they never even taught him how to do any of this. He remembers that the first rule of magic is simple: your image has to hit your mind like a spell. He snaps his eyes to the shelf, and there sits a tiny piggy bank looking incredibly ordinary. This is his battered old piggy bank. He snatched it up and decided to harness it to fuel his brand new abilities. Rint stares at the piggy bank and thinks, "If I'm lucky, I can stash magic in here right alongside the coins." Suddenly, the piggy bank flared with magical light, and the guy snapped to the truth. Turns out it was more than just a piggy bank. It was really a piggy bank. He claims this piggy bank isn't meant for coppers, it's built to swallow magic. Right then, he swore he'd stash it in the piggy bank. And boom, magic kicked in as paper money started raining into it. On the street, someone hurled fireball magic like they were training for a showdown. Rent crept up behind Misei and fired off borrowed magic, and the shock on her face said everything. Her strength rushed back into her body, and she couldn't help but beam as she told the guy, "Magic is back." He stepped right up and told her, "If you want your strength back, press your hand on this piggy bank, then channel the energy straight into it." Misei did exactly that. She pressed her hand to it, and the piggy bank erupted in a warm magical glow, while Renton practically cheered because the girl was doing everything perfectly. The guy happened to be standing right there, snatched up the piggy bank, and grinned, asking what it was. Rent just waved it off, said it was obvious, and claimed it was the best stand-in he could make for the vault. Misei whips around and locks eyes with the guy, commanding his attention with a sharp, daring move. She stepped in, leaned close, and asked the boy if he wanted to join their adventure. The girl told them their plan was simple: register a squad at the guild, her, the guy, and Rent, then scout around to see who else they could pull in. He froze in disbelief, staring at them with one desperate hope: "Please don't tell me you're messing with me." The guy nearby leaned in, slung an arm over his shoulder, and promised that with magic like that, they'd be fine for sure. Then Rent shot back that if he borrowed it, he couldn't use it the way he wanted because he'd have to bring it back, and the guy beside him just nodded like he finally got it all. Misei flashed a smile and told him that Rent had been going on, and on about how badly he dreamed of a life packed with adventure. Rent grinned hard and gave an instant, cheerful yes. He shot a sharp question: had they picked a name for the group? Guy answered with total confidence they'd already chosen everything. The guy thrust his sword up like it was a banner and declared, "This is the sword of the boundless sky, and one day it'll slice straight through the sky itself." Misei lifted a hand to her forehead and asked the guy straight up if he was ready to change his mind. Rent inched closer, ready to confess that for him it was actually pretty awesome. While Guy's smile lit up even more and the girl's face clearly said she couldn't stand it. And yeah, El the healer is on their side, guaranteed to swing the fight their way by patching them up when the battles get brutal. And just like that, their wild adventures kicked off. They tore through the task at breakneck speed. A mind-blowing spell hit the town. Rent somehow granted magical powers to everyone. Monster after monster crumpled in a chain reaction, and it all happened because they fought together, and also, their total magical power rose and fell based on how many units were in the squad. In a cramped local bar, the guys were buzzing about the Sky Boundless Sword Squad. One of them, mug of beer in hand, leaned into the conversation and asked what was going on. Because those guys had jumped from an F-rank start to C-squad in just 2 years, and yeah, they moved like lightning. That man was absolutely obsessed with the Sword of the Boundless Sky. After nailing the mission, Guy grins and suggests they celebrate with fresh uniforms for their next adventures. Missy's beams and admits this one feels super comfy to move in, and Elle practically gushes that she's happy too. Rent scanned the crew and snapped, "What about me?" because he was still stuck in his starting gear. He shot back rudely that he didn't need a new uniform at all, because he never fought face to face. Elle said washing it wouldn't be such a bad idea since the guy reeked, and Rent's face crumpled, his eyes sank even lower at those words aimed his way. Compared to the other three, it barely accelerates, it grows at a painfully slow pace. Because his power only works under some brutal, specific rules. The one who hands out power has to come back for it. But in his case, he pushed closer to the team to tell them this. When the magic they used on Guy hit, it jerked him around so fast he snapped back with a stern look on his face. Rent instantly blushed, shot back that he didn't mean it like that at all, he just couldn't get the words out. Back then, when they were on the same level, they talked freely, no friction, no issues. Yet now, the whole team keeps things respectful, and they move on. Rent's left behind. Because once you grow up, you start seeing the world and even your old beliefs in a whole new light. Elle slams her staff into the ground, snaps out a spell, and blasts her magic to full power. Out of nowhere, the monster lunges for Misei. She snaps aside at the last second, narrowly dodging the strike and slips away before it can catch her. The girl snaps her weapon toward him and screams a fire tornado spell, unleashing pure chaos. Flames surged over the monster, swallowing it whole and grinding it down slowly, burn by burn. Guy stomps the ground, jaw clenched tight, and sets his sights straight on the monster. With a mighty swing of his blade, he summons a vacuum scythe out of thin air. The massive monster finally got knocked down, and there it lay in the water, dead still, like it had completely run out of life. Guy grins wide, slings his sword over his shoulder, and Ranking B declares the moment. Elle beams with a bright smile and says it's a totally ordinary victory day, also Ranking B, and Misa jumps in right after, grinning at how weak they were, her rank B2. Rent stands behind them, clapping hard with a look that screams pure respect, and with his rank at S, he's basically saying, yeah, that was a ride. He shoved him off, lifted his chin with pride, and declared it was time to head to the guild, because he couldn't wait for his assessment. Misei leaned in and asked if they'd heard people were calling their team the closest thing to an A-rank party. No hesitation, the guy just nodded like it was obvious, and then Ren spun around. Back behind him, deep in the wreckage, he spotted a chest waiting to be found. He shouted at the team that he'd uncovered a treasure chest. Rain came down like a war, hammering the rooftops until every house shook. In a tiny hotel, one lonely room held a single candle, flames dancing and casting warm light over just a small pocket of space. Rent sat right in front of his team, his voice heavy with sadness as he just couldn't make sense of what was happening. He stared at the guy, completely dumbfounded, like he couldn't believe a single word. The guy snapped in his face, cutting him off and warning him not to make him repeat himself. Then he said they'd turn down the request clear to the top. He decided they'd hunt down fresh adventurers and build Squad 2.0 from the ground up. And Rent will be excluded. His eyes went blank, and fear mixed with crushing disappointment stared back at everyone. He swallowed hard and with a shaky voice he asked, why him? He couldn't figure out why out of nowhere the whole team was grinning at him with pure sarcasm, like they didn't care. Right then all three of them yanked their big bracelets into view, shining bright in the flicker of the tiny candle. Rent snapped in surprise when he realized they were wearing the exact bracelets from the one on his chest. Guy told him they'd appraised it right there in the shop, and the owner, right there no less, got stunned, saying it was an insanely rare item. And then he explained, this bracelet can refill the owner's magic unit up to a whopping 1,000 units every single day. He basically admitted there are 3 bracelets here, and even that alone was way more than he could ever hand over. Misa shot back that they needed magic, no need for it to boil your blood or turn into something nasty. He fought back, claiming these bracelets would let him summon more than 5,000 units of magic. Rent said that this was the only way they could use any magic at all, right? And then, without warning, Guy shot up from the table. He started to say this was exactly the reason, right down to the core of it. He yanked the guy by the neck and hauled him into the air. Rent's hands started choking him, slow and brutal. With a hard glare burning into him, he growled that he'd test him, then slapped orders on the guy to try escaping. The Rent was crushing him, he could barely breathe, let alone move. He clawed to escape, but his body simply wouldn't let him. He kept glaring straight at the other guy and ordered him to shut his mouth, because his magic wasn't even close to enough to be that smug. Rent quietly begs them to stop, he just wants air in his lungs again, but it's too late, he's powerless and running on pure weakness. His eyes roll back, tears spill out, and all hope drains from him as he gasps, I'm in terrible pain, please let me go. He glares at Guy, pain burning in his eyes, begging him to finally let him go. Slowly, the grip around his neck eased bit by bit, until it finally let go. Rent crashed to the ground, lungs burning as he fought to catch his breath. Elle burst into loud laughter, teasing that the guy's face was absolutely hilarious. He stared at his now former team, rage burning inside him, breathing in slow, trembling pulls as he tried to catch his breath. Misei shot him a stern stare and demanded what kind of look that was, and then she pointed out, without any doubt, that she fully agreed with Guy. She snapped, so you really want her to feel sorry for you. and Ren tried to answer, but the words turned traitor and vanished in his throat, rage and resentment swallowing him whole. He couldn't stand it another second. He burst out of the building, blazing with pure resentment. She flicked her hand at him with a snarky laugh and a cheeky grin, then called out a loud goodbye as he left. The guy grinned like a weight had finally lifted off everyone's shoulders, saying they'd be rid of that nightmare now, no more suffering with him. Misei snapped back that this useless clown should have been thrown out ages ago. The guy burst out laughing and told him the girl really was cruel. Rent trudged forward in the pouring rain, getting soaked as fury and resentment over his old team knotted in his throat. He still saw Guy's wild grin as he lunged to choke him, fingers tight in a clenched fist, this time too. In this mess, he had 0 moves left. The power they handed him, it hit like a total revelation for everyone, and that S-rank gift is something insanely rare. Just get behind him and start pouring that magical power into the line. He couldn't stand it anymore. He yanked the piggy bank off his shoulder and hurled it to the ground, where it crashed with a brutal thud into the rain-soaked earth. Rent stared at the ground with a heavy heart as rain pelted her head, and it felt like the storm matched his sinking mood. He hurled his words into the void, begging the universe, because he never wanted this. Staring at the Trinity's faces, he finally understood. They were all tied to the same truth. He couldn't stop replaying the doubt. Was he really incompetent? And was that the real reason they threw him out? Tears welled up and blurred his vision, then he whispered, so it really is true. So you better believe it, at least. Every spell I copied from him, he'd already handed it all away once. He couldn't stand it one more second. He screamed into the pouring rain, clawing at the air and demanding the strength that was stolen from him be given back. He stayed frozen in silence on that empty street as the rain hammered down like thunder. Suddenly, a voice in his head blared. He'd met every requirement for his gift to finally evolve. Rent jumped in shock as that eerie voice kept talking, saying the storage had grown into an endless vault of magic, and the guy couldn't stop wondering, who is speaking and where is that voice even coming from? Right out of nowhere, a tiny fairy popped into view, shouted Rento, sir, and congratulated him on his heat evolution. Rento was so shocked he couldn't even breathe. The tiny fairy beamed, cheered his gift evolving, and crowned him master with a joyful flourish. She flashed a sweet, dreamy smile and told him she was so happy to finally meet him. Then he declared it the most wonderful moment of his life. Right out of nowhere, she stepped closer and snapped. I never thought I'd be stuck waiting 5 whole years just because my master finally hit his coming of age. Rince's eyes went wide. He jabbed a finger at her and stammered like he couldn't find the courage to finish the words. He blurted at the top of his lungs, asking if she was a heat fairy, and the trap grinned like it knew exactly what he was after, saying, you guessed right. He still remembers the village priest telling him that a fairy is backing him, one with a gift so unique it can change everything. Turns out the story was real. She dipped her head, smiling, and said she was thrilled to meet you. Her name is the Magical Planner, but you can call her Moppy. The fairy grinned and said she couldn't wait to get to know him even more. Ren thought she was adorable, then immediately wondered what he'd say next. Suddenly, the fairy shrieked at the top of her lungs, so shocked by the guy's appearance that she snapped, where did you get that ragged look? He just stood there, stunned, not fully catching what was happening yet. Mappy yanked out an abacus, started tallying an iron breastplate, a worn cloth cloak, and cloth trousers, then snapped, and what kind of sandals are these? She shoved the bills to the front and snapped, 1116 coins, exactly what it takes to get the guy back to normal equipment, give or take. She told him straight up, if that guy wants to work, he better show up dressed right, and Rent instantly clocked that she was pretty weird. Then the guy asked how his gift had grown, and the fairy smiled and said now was the perfect time to check the parchment. Mappy told him that once a skill evolves, the parchment doesn't just change, it gets rewritten with the new info. Rent leaned over his parchment, and there it was, everything changed. His gift had a new name now, Infinite Magic Storage ***. He remembered how his old comrade's skills had leveled up too, like Guy, the ordinary swordsman who transformed into a true advanced master. He stared at his new rank, SSS, and demanded, is there anything above regular S rank? Then the fairy just giggled like she knew a secret she wasn't about to share. She jabbed her finger at something and snapped her hand like, look now, at the guy. A mysterious symbol snagged his attention, so he demanded answers from the fairy. Moppy revealed it was the infinity sign. She grabbed his piggy bank and beamed, saying the boy could stop stressing, because now it could hold an endless amount of magic. Rint didn't catch the fairy's words right away. He just froze in place, silent, staring ahead. Then it hit him like a lightning bolt. The full nightmare finally clicked, and he instantly understood what infinite really meant. Mappy leaned in and said there were 2 rules to unlock infinite magic storage. First, the boy had to have a specific amount of magic power. The girl brightened up and said the second rule was pure, burning emotion. He had to want to repay that debt with his whole heart, no half measures. Rent suddenly remembered the moment he'd just screamed. The girl blurted out, it's a piece of cake. And then she stared him down, asking why he needed 5 whole years to pull it off. Rent snapped out loud that it wasn't that simple at all. Then the fairies grinned back with sharp, sarcastic smiles. Suddenly his energy collapsed and he whispered that he was terrified. He started telling me, I'm built on patience, and he insisted he always acted for the good of his old crew. If he demanded the magic back, it always felt like the second they clawed their way back to their feet, they'd repay him every last bit. Myra flashed a smile and told him he was really kind. Then his jaw dropped, and joy burst through him because, for the first time in ages, someone finally praised him. The fairy snapped at him like he was a worthless local fool and grinned with pure sarcasm. Rent didn't take it, and he fired back, showing his anger loud and clear. She hooked his shoulders in a warm embrace, brushed it off as no big deal, and urged him to check out what else was new. The guy snapped his eyes back to the parchment and started hunting for fresh changes. He stared at 2, 6, 7, 8, then back to 8, 7 utterly baffled, and demanded the fairy explain what number it was because that thing looked insanely huge. Mappy flashed a sly grin and bragged that this was the magic power he'd lent the team. Then Rent practically froze, totally shocked by that massive number he never saw coming, while the fairy snapped back that it was for all 5 years. She told him that the number, 1, 435, 837, was exactly how much magic he had to gather. And she promised he'd be able to pull that much out over an entire year, meaning this was the new forced collection skill he was stuck with. Rant's voice shook as the truth finally hit him. He could rip magical energy straight out of his debtors. He finally realized he could claw back every ounce of energy he'd once thrown away. The fairies smirked, locking eyes with the guy who was so clearly into this, only he just now realized it. Why did she look at him like that, like pure cruelty had taken over her face? He blasted Marie with a loud, sudden question, asking how he could use that power, and the fairy scrambled to calm the frantic boy down. She told him bluntly that activation comes with strict conditions. First, you've got to sign a contract with the debtor, and Rent made that word hit like a command in his own mind. Mappy told me there are different kinds of forced returns of magic, but they're tangled like a puzzle you can't ignore, and if you really stop and think about it. The fairy snapped at the guy, demanding he hand it over and leave it to her. Rent grinned at the fairy, and his whole heart was ready to bet everything on her. 2 men strolling by sized him up with pure distrust. They hung on every breath, waiting for the question, who was that guy chatting near the tree? They couldn't spot the fairy at all, and the shock hit hard when they realized a boy was actually talking to the air. They decided to leave the guy alone, and even with that tough pass in front of them, they still figured it was their best move. Fresh sunshine exploded across the sky, like the rain had been crushed and finally thrown out for good. Once more the hotel fell silent. Then Guy burst back out and told everyone, like it was nothing short of perfect, that last night had gone wonderfully. He shoved every useless thought to the side and told the guys, "We're heading to the guild, we need a new comrade." And just like that, something ripped through his focus and cut him off mid-thought. He stood right in front of them, chin up like he owned the place, and the whole team was shocked to the core. They never, ever expected to see him here. The guy blurted out super rudely, "Why are you coming back out of nowhere?" Elle flashed a grin, fired off an apology, and reminded everyone they already kicked that guy out of the group. So the swordsman nodded, saying there was no room for him here anymore. Missy blurted that he showed up right on time, bag in hand. Then she snatched her way through and rudely tossed it at his feet, telling him he could pick it up. She said the innkeeper had busted his ass gathering all this junk, and Missy's just drawled slowly like, "We don't even know what to do with it all." Rent jolted the parchment forward and shoved it right in front of them. He rattled off every borrowed magical power they had in their arsenal and broke the list down for the whole team. He didn't catch it right away, but then he asked, "So you're ready to hand back every single thing you've taken over all these years?" The whole team hated that wording and Missy snapped, "So what are you planning exactly?" Rent snapped at them to shut up and stay silent. He couldn't shake the feeling that everyone already knew, if you borrowed. "We've got to get all of this back," because his face screamed pure confusion, like he didn't get a single thing about what was going on. Rent pressed on, insisting his gift wasn't some worthless trinket like a bracelet. Then he went straight at the other guy to kick off his point. He yanked the guy up by his clothes, ripping him off the ground in an instant. He stared the guy dead in the eyes and demanded, "Can you really undo everything that easily?" Because yeah, that kind of rude treatment made his skin crawl. Rent's stomach dropped. Mopey was blasting through the air right near him, flying at full speed. Guy rudely demanded that the Rent, like it owed them something, show them way more respect. Elle cackled with pure sarcasm. Rent clawed for the words, fighting to find his strength again, because he desperately needed it back. Guy slammed the other to the ground. Rent jerked up, started gulping for air, and said that what his team ahead had already spoken. Pinned to the ground, he swallowed his pride and begged, straight up politely, for every last bit of magic the team had stolen from him to be handed back. He stomped on the kid's head and told him, straight up, they'd never let that happen again, then ordered him to vanish and never show up before them ever again. Behind him, the girls cackled with evil glee, savoring the pathetic moment where the poor kid got crushed. Haunted and filthy, he drops in a heap on the ground, rent, battered, and completely spent. He casually strolled past and with zero respect rudely snapped by as he went. He spun around fast, shot his hand up and said cool as ice that they'd settle the score another time. Rent crumpled on the ground again, shaking with fresh pain. His hands slowly dragged through the sand as rage, hurt, and pure resentment clawed at him, and he refused to just walk away and leave it like this. He cracked his eyes open and stared at the backs of his old team, panting like his lungs were on fire. Suddenly, the Central News Agency broke in with the update. Turns out they'd nailed the debtor's identity, and the contract was officially drafted and set. The fairy swooped in and told her master it was time. He could finally use the new skill, so Rent snapped up from the ground, fury and old bitterness burning in his eyes as he got ready to collect the debt. He snapped his new skill to life, ***, forced gathering ***. They shuffled forward in sync, trading frustrated gripes about how insanely annoying that guy was. Elle blurted that she couldn't believe the guy was trying to crawl back to them, and Guy snapped back that after what he'd done, he shouldn't come back again. Missy said teaching him the lesson one more time, even harder, was the only way to make sure it actually worked. The guy grinned with pure venom and snapped that the girl was downright cruel. She flashed a grin and spun toward Guy like she had something huge to say. Then, wham, magic in the shape of paper money burst out of them, the very cash Rent had once handed over, and a massive wave of magical power blasted from the team like a rocket, tearing away fast. Mesa felt a weird jolt hit her for a split second. Guy leaned in and asked what happened, and the girl shot back sharply that everything was perfectly fine. He figured the girl could feel his dirty stare crawling on her skin, and Missy hated it. She snapped at him for spitting nonsense, and the entire team burst into laughter. Missy's neck was covered in a mysterious glowing mark, like something was burning its way into her skin. Marie dipped her head and begged him to forgive her. Rent's jaw dropped. He stared at her and blurted, "What hit you, girl?" She told him that the guy looked tougher than the Rent to her, then the guy snapped that he didn't like hearing it. The fairy muttered that it felt that way to her too, and Rent shot her a disgruntled look, clearly not satisfied. Marie smirked and snapped that she was only messing around. The guy hesitated, then finally let out a breath and relaxed a little. Out on the street, magical money storms zipped through the air like it had a mission, whipping toward a tiny top-floor window to slip back home into its native piggy bank. Suddenly, the paper money turned into magical power, came blasting into the piggy bank at full speed, and the whole team snatched it up as it flew. It freaked the guy out so bad. He blinked in shock and demanded, "So it really worked?" The fairy smiled and said the whole collection went through perfectly, everything matched the contract word for word, and the waitress beside him stared at the guy like he'd just pulled a magic trick. Murray leaned in and declared that from this moment on, every last scrap of their piled-up magical power would be sucked straight into his piggy bank. Rent stared at the parchment, and the moment he saw it, his jaw dropped, because the magic sealed in the vault hadn't just stayed the same, it had grown. Suddenly, a voice blared that he'd finally met the requirement for a new skill, and honestly, it didn't even shock him anymore. This was the first time that voice had showed up. The voice blurted out that Rent had just picked up a brand new magical technique, and the fairy was right there, clocking it instantly like she'd seen it with her own eyes. A magical technique that gulps the users, or even the stashes, magic reserves, then powers up the user's maximum magic right where they stand. Pay 1,000 units and his maximum magic power jumps by 1, so why is the fairy staring at him and asking, is something wrong? Rent scratched the back of his head embarrassed, and admitted he'd expected it to hit harder, something cooler and way more powerful. Marie flashed a sly grin and asked what he was going on about, then told him it was the perfect skill for growth. Right after that, the guy jolted in fear and blurted out a sharp yes, 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 scared out of his wits by her smile, while the fairy cleared her throat with a faint, deliberate pause. He already has an endless stash, so even if he boosts his magic level right now, it never runs out. He wheeled on the fairy, reminded her she'd bragged about forced collection methods, and demanded to know if it was true, then he pressed, "So what methods are there?" The fairy just smiled and promised she'd spell it out in a few words. She launched into it right away, saying there were 3 brutal types of forced collection. It's a one-shot method. Once you start it, you grab every single bit of magic all at once. The second option, payment and installments, locks in the number of payments and the amount ahead of time, but the third. The fairy smirked and said the third way, the so-called gates to hell, just means renewable fees, and Rent didn't get a single thing until the fairy snapped back that it's the contract they signed today. The guy demanded what on earth was so terrifying about renewable fees, and Marie shot back that there were actually a whole bunch of things. She started to explain it was like a sand trap. No matter how desperately you fought, you couldn't break free, and it's the most hellish way to collect. The girl shrugged and said it was a set fee to pay, then she leaned in and whispered that almost Rent gets wiped out, like, isn't that basically the same thing as an installment? The fairy laid it out straight. They'd split the total into parts, collect bit by bit, and even if the daily payments feel rough, the debtor still gets the full payoff in the end. She snapped that renewable debt was a whole different beast, and her eyes widened in confusion, like she couldn't make sense of a single thing. She pointed out that it doesn't matter if the debtor takes $100 or 10,000. Every time, they end up paying back the exact same amount. Rents got hooked and the girl kept going. She decided to prove her point by dragging his old team into the story. You've got 3,600 power total, 360 recovery, and you gain 10% every hour. So in a day that adds up to 8640 units, with 3,000 of that being recoverable, for a one-day magic haul of 11,640 collected power. The fairy grinned, brushed her fingers across the abacus, and declared, after the loan, you'll pull in 1435 out of 7 units. Then, with 8% interest for 10 days, you'll pocket a cool 115,000 mister. By the end of the year, Rent snapped her off mid-sentence and demanded to know whether he'd have to fork over any percentage for the skills he used. The girl kept smiling and insisted, of course you'll pay, then name-dropped the endless magical storage, and the guy realized the fairy was talking just like a ruthless moneylender. Mappy said, if you stack 11,640 every single day, assuming it gets collected, then in just 10 days you'll reach 116,400, and the interest that piles up over those 10 days hits 115,000. Then right as he thought he'd figured it out, some kind of realization crept in, one slow beat at a time. She kept coming for him, flashing a sinister grin as she said the real debt wasn't shrinking at all. She said the lazy ones just keep piling on interest, and the second a new month flips, new debts practically explode. Then the guy just froze, staring at her with a face full of shock. He barked at the fairy, sharp and loud, asking if she really forged that kind of pact. Then she just smirked, all sarcasm, and said, yeah, it is. Wrench shot a thought into his mind. He'd handed it all over to the fairy's say-so, and she just smiled and told him everything would be okay, so he didn't have to worry at all. The girl pointed out how the guy's old team never even thanked him, and now it was time they finally got exactly what they deserved. The fairy snapped that he'd been insulted and thrown out of the squad they'd all built together. Her voice suddenly turned harsh. She snapped that these scum weren't worth a single shred of pity. Rent blinked in shock at the sudden shift and whipped around to plead with the girl, trying to get through to her. The fairy's grin snapped wild, almost inhuman. He roared that they had to hunt them down, crush them with raw force, hurl them into the abyss of despair, and make them regret every last thing. The girl then shot back that maybe they weren't even good enough to pull it off. Rent snapped on the fairy with a sharp call to shake her out of her wild spiral, and the girl reacted instantly. The guy admitted it terrified him, and Moppy shrugged it off like, I'm just saying what I feel. But everyone nearby just stared, baffled as those guys suddenly burst into screams. Rent shot back saying it wasn't really like that at all, and the fairy smirked with sharp, sarcastic bite. Rent slowly bowed his head, letting his mind sink deep into its own thoughts. Moppy told him the contract could be swapped anytime, and the guy finally got it all. The girl couldn't stop wondering if the guy ever apologized for this mess. Would Rent really have to deal with it? Maybe he'd even tell her he'd think about it. The fairy told him straight up that his kindness was so strong it bordered on being dangerous. She snapped her thoughts together and said he was probably just a sweet fool. Then Rent lost it, cursed the nickname, and screamed at her to shut up and stop. A guild sign that blasted the team's invitation, recruiting fresh recruits to join their crew. She pointed at herself and declared, I'm a natural-born thief and I'm fast. And the team shot back, we don't need that. The dark-aged man snapped that his gift was dark magic, and that he looked older than he really was. The team shot back that they didn't need more stress over some decrepit old man. The guy snapped up out of his chair, waved everyone out, and told them the recruitment was officially over. Rage boiled in his chest because everyone who showed up today were a bunch of losers, and it made him furious. Elthroat lifted her chin high and snapped that nobody could ever match their gorgeous squad, and the guy grinned right along with her. Missy grabbed a sheet of parchment, praised the adventurer as perfect, and declared he was a sniper. Then Guy leaned in and studied the paper with intense focus. He caught himself and went, whoa, you look way too much like someone I know, and it hit him hard. He snapped at Missy, demanding to know if she'd missed her rent. She bowed her head and spat out, I hate you with everything in me, then practically smiled because they'd finally gotten rid of him for good. The girl told him that every adventure had taught her something new. When asked what kind of guys she likes, she said she goes for men who know their worth, stay dependable, and don't fold under pressure. The guy suddenly got it, and he stared at the girl with this weird, unmistakable look. Elle snapped at the girl to back off from her boyfriend, then Missy shot back, since when did you two become a couple? The guy burst into laughter at the entire mess, like it was the funniest thing on earth. Suddenly he spotted a weird sign stamped on the girl's neck, so he swung around and demanded to know what it was. Missy's jaw dropped. Elle told her that the same neck sign was on that guy too, and she couldn't believe it. They stared at the girl, and then it hit them. Every single team member had it hanging around their neck too. Miss stared into the mirror and snapped, "What the hell is that?" Elle said it looked like some kind of magic symbol, and Guy practically yelled that he didn't remember casting a single spell. The girl said, "Check their statuses now, maybe then we'll finally understand what's happening to us." The girl stared at the owl parchment, and her magic was gone, every last spark had vanished. Maria, as if she were paper money, rocketed up to the roof of one of the houses in a blink. They all tore into Rent's piggy bank, stacking their loot inside until it started piling up. The guy's eyes widened when he realized the magic in the storage had surged again, and that sneaky fairy was giggling right beside him. Mappy snapped that she was absolutely certain the hero's old team was now reeling in total shock from everything that happened. Rent started to breathe easy until the thought hit him, what if they figured out this whole mess was his doing? He was 100% convinced they'd come hunting for him by the fairy side, and he pushed the question, was that guy really so terrified of them? She said that if it really came to that, he should just go beat them up, and Rent's jaw dropped. He couldn't believe the guy would slug someone, especially with a team like that. He snapped his eyes open, stared at the fairy, and swore he had zero strength left for something like this. The fairy snatched up the piggy bank, shot into the sky with it, and leaned down to ask the boy if he'd picked up any new skills yet. After she handed him the piggy bank, she lit a match under his ambition and told him to blow his brand new powers wide open starting right then. Rent locks eyes with his piggy bank and studies it like he's seeing it for the very first time. Bit by bit, it finally hit him what was really going on. He leaned in and grilled the fairy, demanding to know if this was the next step in evolving the next gift. Mappy flashed a mysterious smile like he was about to drop a secret on you. The fairy finally started remembering. On that day, the master's soul called out to him. She screamed through days of pure misery and pain, begging the world for a brand new adventurer to be born. She suffered through a life where he had to cling to others, but that chapter is over now. From this moment on, he's done waiting. He'll forge his own route and cook up adventures nobody else could ever imagine. Maybe told Rent that he was crazy strong and that he needed to start believing in himself. She flashed a confident smile and promised that if he ever hit trouble, she'd drop everything to stand by her master. Tears welled up in the guy's eyes, and he couldn't stop smiling as he thanked the fairy for those kind words. He beamed from ear to ear and thanked Mappy with every ounce of his heart. The girl lined in and demanded to know what he was planning for his future. She made it clear, besides running their magic collection, she's pushing for them to level up and make it all grow. Rent flashed a grin and told them, "I know the perfect place, trust me." She told me that just outside Melba sits an artificial citadel built by an ancient sorcerer. Rent told everyone he'd been training there for a while after the squad finally came together. Mappy demanded to know where this city was, and the guy shot back that it was way out of reach from where they stood right now. So even if they rode a high-speed carriage, they'd still be stuck on the road for about 2 whole weeks. The fairy began crunching the numbers and everything clicked into place. Then she swore that even if those scum came chasing it, they'd at least buy them a little time. Mappy pushed for going to that city right now. Rent straightened up and agreed on the spot, and the fairy started counting 3 weeks like it was already underway. The girls grinned cruelly and promised that in just 3 weeks, they'd finally build the power to take down the guy and his old team. She scrubbed like her life depended on it, trying to wash those sudden, strange marks off of them. A gigantic carriage packed with people kept rolling forward somewhere beyond sight. Rint slumped into one of the chairs, shut his eyes tight and sank into his own thoughts. As he sat there, he unleashed the magic operations skill. Rent spun toward the fairy and told them they'd start by dropping just 1,000 for now. Then he boosted his max MP by 10, right as the system's voice blared that the condition had finally been met. When he casts a magic operation, the power he regains hits twice as hard. He was totally stunned, because now his power shoots up to double what it used to be. Normally he only gets a 10% recovery, but this time it was insane, and honestly he thought it was the coolest thing ever. The fairy winked and grinned, saying this wasn't even close to the limit, and for now they'd have to use all of it with absolute care. The guy ahead of the carriage blurted that the cart headed for Melba was about to depart, then told them to haul ass. The Heavenly Sword team was stuck inside the sorcerer's shop, and the man leaned in, staring at the girl's neck sign like he could crack its secret. Then dug through his book, line after line, but came up with nothing, because every detail just didn't match. The old man shoots himself with questions. Could this be some piece of ancient writing? But that strange sign won't make sense to him, and Missy snaps, impatient as ever, asking if he still has no clue what it is. He told them that after working in this business for over 80 years, he still never dreamed he'd stumble on a sign he'd never seen before. A rude guy shoved closer, blared, "Why did you suddenly get so emotional? Fix this now." And the old man immediately started blurting apologies, pure shame flooding his face. The team kicked off their wild adventure, and Guy snapped her sword through the air, slicing the monster in front of her to pieces. Misei shot out her hand and hurled a fireball, blasting the monster out of their path. He touched his cheek and felt it. He'd been hit, and that cut, as sting throbbed like it was still alive. He was thrown for a loop, because monsters usually never even got the chance to lay a finger on him. So when it finally happened, rage exploded in his chest. Misei pulled out a potion and practically bragged, "We got lucky, this spell isn't infinite." Then she grinned and said, "Drink it and refill your magic reserves and you'll be fine." In her hand sat a magic restoration potion, and it was priced at a jaw-dropping 10,000 gold. The guy asked how many of those bottles the girls had, and she said around 50, then swung the bag around to show every single bottle inside. The guy stared in shock at the huge stash of potions, and Misei shot back that she'd paid 500,000 gold for every last one. Then the guy sighed and said they'd better be satisfied with what they've got right now. Misei snapped back that the bottles would dry up someday, so they needed to scrub those marks off their cabbage soup right now. Only it lit a fuse in the guy, because to him it was pure hell. He pressed his hand back on the wound and barked at Elle to help him heal. She shot back, "I can't, I'm out of magic," and her words hit like a dead spell. Rage surged through him as he leaned in close, snapped that every word she'd said was nonsense, and demanded she drink the potion to get her strength back, only for her to start protesting, "It's bitter." He snapped at her to cut the childish act, then hit her with, "So what, are you totally useless without that magic potion?" Elle snapped and burst into loud sobs, and Mesa and Guy just stood there, watching in silent shock. The guy stalked forward in silence, nerves screaming at their breaking point. He was done with all this. Misei lunged to stop him, but he barked for her to get lost and demanded to know if it was his fault that Elle refused to restore her magical powers. Elle sobbed at the top of her lungs, shrieking that she wouldn't drink the potion. Yet deep down, she desperately wanted her magic back. Misa grabbed the guy's hand to keep him from going, and a wild thought hit her mind. Rent suddenly flashed through my mind. Suddenly, the girl started to sink into the truth, and she hated it, because it felt impossible, so she clung to the idea that the one who cast the spell. Guy and Elle leaned in, eyes locked on the girl, hanging on her every word. Misei's voice trembled as she called out Rent's name, swearing it was all his fault, while Rent himself sat cool as ice in the carriage, quietly listening to the fairy. He stared at the girl and demanded to know if she truly loved admiring nature. Then the fairy lit up and confessed that she just couldn't get enough of it. She snapped, asking what volcano was looming in the distance, and Rent shot back, Mount Grimo, and then spilled the rumor that a dragon's nest might be waiting at the very top. Mapie's eyes lit up like fireworks, sparkling with pure joy and kid-level wonder. Rent smiled with real tenderness, moved by the fairy's kindness, and he started to wonder. He'd figured Marie knew everything under the sun, but nope, she didn't. Today marks the 6th day of his journey, while magic has been pouring into him non-stop, boosting his maximum power again and again. Because of this, the value now jumps to 4,779, totally on par with the kind of mind-blowing power you'd expect from a legendary magician. Yeah, magic operations aren't just useful, they're a seriously op skill. It lets him pour magical power in and out of the vault like it's his own bloodstream. Only, right now, he's got no clue how to use that power yet, but according to Mappi, time will grind on and on until every last thing finally gets it. This skill's power will be understood. So now he can only sit there, staring ahead, already fired up for the next big upgrades. Mappi pressed her face to the window, buzzing with childish excitement as she eagerly took in every bit of nature around her. Suddenly, the system roared to life, announcing that 350,000 units were poured into the magic operation. And boom, the condition was satisfied, so the spell's level just jumped up by 1. The purchase skill suddenly unlocked, and it hit the guy like a truck because he had zero clue what it even meant. The fairy shot closer and whispered that her master could pull it off. Rent stared at the parchment like it was nonsense, then snapped that absolutely nothing new had shown up on it. The fairy told him just wave it, and the guy went wide-eyed like he couldn't believe it. Mappi jabbed her finger at the exact move he needed to make, and basically shoved him to do it. She also told me, if you swipe your finger from the bottom up. Rent did exactly that, and the moment he swiped up, a flood of fresh information exploded across the parchment. His eyes snapped wide with pure shock. Was it really happening? The fairy smiled and asked, "Everything you're seeing, is it amazing? Isn't this the perfect choice?" Rent's eyes raked over the text, locking in on every skill listed on his sheet. Mopey told him God handed these things to people, so most of the time you can't just get them out of nowhere. The guy couldn't stop wondering, was it even real that you could buy those things? The fairy grinned with vicious delight because she'd just realized he'd nailed it. The girl snapped and said, "This is all going down because of a crazy one-of-a-kind SSS rank skill." After her monologue ended, Moppi leaned in and asked the kid what kind of adventurer he wanted to become, promising she'd always back him up with advice. Then she wrapped it all up with one killer line. Now he could pick up almost any skill. 2 weeks screamed by, and at last the couple pushed through and finally rolled into the city of Melba. Rent froze in the middle of the street, whipping his gaze around like he was hunting for something. The fairy said, "This place is packed." And the guy shot back, "Yeah, adventurers from everywhere flock in to tackle the great labyrinth of Nelba." Sharply asked if the rent was already due the moment he kicked off his adventure. Then the guy just nodded and said, "Yeah, it was." They burst into a tiny shop. The pretty girl leaned in and asked if he belonged to any group, then grilled him again. Was he really sure he wanted to ditch his old city and move to Melba? He gave her a solid yes. The girl grinned and said the registration was done, locked in for good, and the guy just got the green light to finally challenge the Great Labyrinth, so he congratulated him like it was a huge win. Rent promised it would hand him a major edge. The fairy grinned with cruelty and promised that if these scum ever came for them, fear wouldn't stand a chance. The couple sprinted into a massive labyrinth, and the walls felt like they were closing in on them. They huddled right by the entrance to the Great Labyrinth of Melba, staring into the nightmare beyond. The fairy was way up in the air, then she pointed down and declared that the dungeon stood right here. She begged her master to press on, and the boy grinned and nodded, ready to move forward. They crept forward step by step, and their brand new adventure finally kicked off. First level, Great Plains, just level up if you're a recommended adventure level F. Maybe stares forward and blurts out how they even wound up here, and the guy just smirks, because this is the Great Labyrinth of Melba. He figured this whole space was carved out by some ancient sorcerer, and honestly, nobody can prove it for sure. A sudden rustle from the grass yanked their attention. Small but deadly Manitoba rats sprang up in front of them, snarling for human flesh like it was their favorite meal. Rent yanked out his weapon and snapped his focus onto the demons looming ahead, perfect timing, because right then was the only moment he'd get to test his skills. The rats bolted ahead on sharp little steps, ready to slam into Rent and sink their teeth into him. The guy can't forget how Mabai talked about a close combat skill, and it hooks Big Eye so hard his curiosity won't let go. Wrench pulled out a tiny dagger and told the fairy it was for defense, even though he barely ever used it. Then Mappy smiled and said, "Everything's perfect, now's the moment to test it." Rent burst forward and smashed the first hit, landing a blow that wounded the little rat. This is the dirty trick every rookie scammer learns first. Pay 1,000 and you get it, mister. The boy snapped his dagger through the air again, cutting down rat after rat in front of him, until each strike fueled his courage and he plowed on, one kill at a time. In the carriage, the fairy leaned in and warned him about the next kind of strike, long-range attacks. Rent figured he'd need magic he could pull off fast and clean, so he handed the girl a single option. The rat whipped around from behind and yanked its mouth open, trying to bite the guy in half, but he snapped his hand aside and raised his strike. Rent whipped his hand through the air and blasted a fireball first-level fire magic, and it burned a whopping 1,000 MP to cast. Rent stood tall with a straight back, wheezing hard after that brutal hit, and his hand looked like it had been lightly burned. Right nearby, the fairy burst into view and blared her praise, yelling that he'd mastered magic at lightning speed. Rent himself had trained up his powers. Now he moved faster, darted with sharp agility, and even with Maggle and magic at his side, he swore it all came from Moppy's recommendations. Right beside them in the grass, a small object lay half-hidden, and the sunlight made it look weirdly unreal. The fairy spotted a few jokes dropping out of the rats, and the guy shot back that it was a magic stone. Rent added that every time they wipe out demons in the dungeon, those monsters drop into magic stones that match their strength, and if you haul one back to the guild, they'll trade it straight for cash. The fairy's eyes flared to life and she pressed, "Is it true?" Then the moment it was said, pure motivation exploded inside her. Rent spun around and stared as a small group of people battled the rats, screaming at the top of their lungs while they shook their injured hands. The girl shrieked that the healing medicine was running out, while the guy yelled for her to hurry, because once they pulled it off, they'd cash in big. Mappy snorted a giggle and branded them ordinary newbies. Rent shot back that he and the others were just the same. He remembers it clearly. Back then, he was always lagging behind, tossing in magical power so the whole squad could keep going. The fairy flashed a grin and stared hard at the rats, and the moment they spotted her, they sprinted straight toward her. So the girl wasted no time telling the guy exactly what was happening. Rent, eyes blazing with no fear at all, lifted his dagger and cut down the rats. And just like that, everything in his life was about to change for good. His heart is pounding like it's trying to break out of his chest. He had never, ever felt anything hit this hard before. The guy drops onto a rock and stares at his own feet like they're telling him a secret. He shot his hand forward and popped healing magic on the spot. First-level recovery magic burned 1,000 MP to cast. Mopey zipped around him grinning, saying, "At this pace, we'll hit the next level any second." And the guy nodded right away. He burst into a bright grin and told the fairy he'd love to stay here longer, because he wanted to test himself even better. Moppy grinned from ear to ear and said, "That's such a cool idea." Rent and Missy snuggle in the cart, then roll off slowly, like they're heading to someplace that'll change everything. The The guy snaps his head toward her and asks straight up if she still remembers the adventure dream he had. Mrs. grinned so hard it lit up her face and told her like it was obvious. Yeah, of course she remembered. Suddenly, the girl slipped her hand over his and confessed that she'd been thinking about him for ages. Then his face erupted in a full-on blush. She told him that the moment she became an adventurer, she made one promise to herself. She would stay by his side. Mrs.'s expression snapped hard, and with a rough bark in her voice, she told him straight up. The guy was totally, completely useless. Rent bolted upright out of bed, snapping awake like something just yanked the world. He panted like his lungs were on fire. A fairy sprawled nearby as he slumped in silence, staring at the ceiling like, was that really a dream? Next day, the whole crew charged straight for the next tier. Melba's Great Labyrinth, Level 2. Great Goblin Sea, where you need a recommended adventurer and you're aiming for Level E. Rent carefully pushed deeper into the trees, staring at how jam-packed the undergrowth was here. He hooked his finger to his chin, tapped the first presence detection skill, and felt the MP drain as it charged him a brutal 5,000 MP. Rent leans in and tells them goblins are almost definitely ahead, like a whole colony is waiting. He knows taking them out one by one is that hard since they're weak, but the real trouble hits when they don't come alone, they swarm as a group. A fairy flits close by, then laps at him with pure malice. She's convinced the moment's finally here, to put his brand new skills to work and prove what they can do. He nodded, finally seeing she was right, and at that moment he knew it was time to level up and get stronger. Rent fires up his first level signal blocking skill, then the price hits hard, a 5,000 MP cost. With a single swing he wiped out one goblin, then cracked the next one just as fast, boom, both gone. In a tiny goblin village, every dreamer snapped into a job, then lived their life their own way. No rules, no cages, just freedom. I snatched the Rent from the bushes just outside the village. With a careful grip on the piggy bank, he finally unleashed his gift and poured out magical energy like a secret coming to life. The goblins clocked the guy and stared him down, holding back like they were waiting for a signal. Then they snapped, threw their mouths open and charged to tear into him. Sheets of magic stamped paper money drifted down. Then they ignited midair, sizzling away the second they neared the ground. With a fierce frown, Rents thrust his hand forward and unleashed his power, blazing several magical fireballs into the air. Every thrown ball struck true, mowing down every goblin in its path until the last one crumpled. Smoke billowed into the air, and as it cleared, the truth of the goblin village was finally laid bare. Rent stared straight ahead and realized he could finally cast spells without fumbling, and that power felt incredible. Spending magical power isn't just costly, it rips into the body like a heavy chain you can't shrug off. The fairy grilled her master, asking if he could run for ages, but he shook his head and snapped that he couldn't handle it. Then Mappy chimed in, it's the same with magic. You can't keep magic running non-stop. The fairy swore that if you let go of magical energy, you can cloak your body in that power now, and unleash it later. Mappy told me you can stack the same spell back to back now, and even fire off a whole bunch at once. Rent inched forward, eyes darting everywhere as he searched for any sign that he'd actually pulled it off. Suddenly, a giant goblin loomed right in front of him, revealing itself as the goblin chieftain, the colony's ruthless leader. Rent launched a fresh barrage of fire projectiles, and each one detonated the moment it slammed into the goblin's body. He erupted into flames, and all that was left afterward were burning ashes. The fairy burst into loud screams like everything turned out perfect, and the guy just let out a shaky, nervous laugh. The girl erupted, yelling that he wiped out an entire colony of goblins all by himself. Rents grinned and told him, "You're not alone," then pointed out the fairy was right nearby. Mappy let out an awkward little laugh and blurted out that it was seriously sweet of him. The fairy's determination flared up, and she thrust her fist into the air, shouting that they had to keep going with the same spirit. The couple stormed into the guild. A gorgeous girl stepped up to the scales and announced they were finally weighing the stones the goblins left behind. 341 of them total. Then she smirked and said that came out to 134,100 gold. The girl kept going. If the goblin leader was taken down, the guy would earn 10,500 gold on top of everything he'd managed to loot during the adventure, bringing the total to 42,000, and she was about to announce the full payout. When it was all said and done, the total hit 186,600 gold. So the girl slammed a giant sack right in front of the guy, leaving him completely stunned, while the fairy's eyes practically sparkled at the massive pile. Knight swallowed the city as a guy and his companion kicked back in a tiny hotel, finally letting their guard down. The fairy devoured her fried squid like it was a feast, snapping up every bite with unstoppable energy. She practically glowed after that hearty lunch. Rent roared that all their hard work pushed the boy's adventure rank from E up to D, and that if he kept using the skills he'd learned, he could keep leveling up into something even stronger. With his fist clenched tight, the boy realizes that if he keeps going, he'll finally be able to stand up for himself and swing back at Guy. and that spark of resolve drives him to train. The fairy grinned and told him, "Since you just moved to a new city, that old team won't catch you anytime soon, give it time. They'll realize the contract is real and come charging after us." Mappy told them they had to stack up another 150,000 units. She said that right here and now they'd finally unlock fresh skills, and once they did, fear wouldn't stand a chance. Rent snapped that 150,000 units was outrageous, and they'd be slogging a long way to make it work. But the fairy shot back that they'd handle it for sure, no need to panic. She clasped her hands in a quiet prayer and poured her gratitude into the boy, thanking him for the food. Rent leaned in and asked if the girl wanted anything else, and the fairy practically chirped, "Anything else tasty?" The guy grinned and told her she could eat to her heart's content. Then he went on, determined to thank her for every single thing she'd done for him. Muppy flashed a grin and told him, "This time I need your magical power." He snapped in surprise and blurted the question again, and this time he got the right answer fast, like it was waiting for him. The fairy grinned and said that for her, magical power isn't just a gift, it's the finest delicacy, pure nectar. Rent got hit with surprise all over again and snapped that she should have told him about her powers sooner. The fairy bristled, insisting that mastering the skills mattered more, and the guy immediately asked how much she wanted. Then Mappy grinned, stunned he actually agreed and asked for 100. Rent snatched the piggy bank into his hands, demanded to know the right way to do it, and even hinted that he had some secret skill to make it work. The fairy pressed her lips into a weird little pout, and the guy froze, because he didn't expect that reaction at all. The girl insisted that they needed direct contact, and Rent didn't get it right away, until the fairy cut in and said it was the fastest, best route. The guy just had to nod along and pout. With Mappy resting on his palm, he leaned in and brushed her lips with the softest touch. She snapped the kiss away and tumbled into his arms, grinning like her whole world finally made sense. Rent leaned in and asked the fairy, "So, how are you feeling?" Marie grinned and shot back, "I'm totally good, everything's fine." He wrestled with it for a second, then realized, holy crap, this was his very first kiss. Again, a cart rolls up, packed with people all crammed inside. Young Miss A flashes a grin and tells Rent's mom she's got the best, no, the most special skill of them all. She said she'd always known that boy was born for adventure. And when she finished, Rent grinned and told her guy said the exact same thing. Right behind them, the guy was out cold on the hay and the girl snapped in, he'd already gotten the swordsman's skill. She shrugged that it was nothing special, then said dragon heats aren't exactly rare. Miss A grinned and asked Rent to travel with her from here on out, and Rent's smile lit up the room as he said yes. Then he added that they just had to go make a whole bunch of fresh stories together. That girl's cheeks flamed red, and when she looked at Rent, it hit different. She started praising everything, then asked boldly if they could finally be together in a whole new way. Rent's face went crimson, he couldn't believe she'd just shot him that kind of proposal. For a couple of heartbeats, his mind went blank and no sound came out of his mouth at all. All he could force out was her name. With wide, sparkling, cute eyes, the girl blurted out, "Do you love me?" And the guy stammered, "Yeah, I think so," so shy his gaze kept darting everywhere, while his cheeks burned even brighter red. Miss A decided to strike first. She inhaled, pouted, and slid her face in with every ounce of nerve, slowly at first. Then in just a couple seconds, her lips were dangerously inches from Ren's. Suddenly that sweet warmth vanished, cold pressed against his lips. So he jerked his eyes open and realized the kiss wasn't from a girl at all, it was from an apple. Rent didn't take it well at all. He snapped and blurted it out with a terrified shriek, while Miss A burst into laughter and hurried to apologize to the guy for the dumb joke. The girl flashed a gentle smile, apologized once more, and admitted she wasn't ready for anything serious, telling him the whole idea sounded stupid to her, so she just wanted to play it off as a joke. Rent awkwardly scratched the back of his head, blurting that he finally understood everything for sure. His grin looked shaky since they'd made a dumb joke at his expense, but he didn't care enough to stay mad or make it a big deal. Suddenly, Guy's cries ripped through the air from behind. He was sick of that noise outside, so Rent snapped his attention over, shocked he'd jolted awake so hard, while Miss C's told him they could sleep a bit longer since the city was still far off. Rent's chest ached as it all came crashing back. He and them were inseparable, then they tossed him aside and swapped him for a few bracelets. Now he's set on revenge all the way to the end. Rage and despair swallowed him whole, grief clawed at his heart, and suddenly all he could think about was revenge, fueling a fierce plan to reclaim every ounce of strength with interest. If he never met Mappy, what chance did he even have? He'd be stuck on the streets in that pouring rain, worse than forgotten, straight up discarded by society, unwanted and left behind. He tugged the blanket up over her tiny frame, sealing her in warmth for the whole night. When he stared at the fairy, a weird ache hit him, nothing like love, nothing like deep affection. He couldn't even figure out what it was he felt for that tiny, cruel girl. The moment he sees her, his whole soul lights up, warm, steady, and calm again. Like her presence snapped him back to life and reminded him he's not walking this road alone. He finally realizes he's genuinely happy, Then he grabs his blanket, tucks himself in, and whispers goodnight to the sleeping fairy beside him, while the stars blaze bright over the whole city. The girl behind the counter flashes those stiff, practiced smiles and tells him, just like he said before, that Mr. Rent is out there somewhere in the city. The guy blares out, "No way, we've been hunting you for days." And the girl just blurts, "I'm so sorry to hear that," but he immediately explodes again, cursing at her and demanding, "Who do you think you are?" Misei edged in close and snapped, "Hey, calm down, we don't need any more drama, got it?" Plopped inside her house, Misei tried to figure out exactly how much power they were bleeding, because on the parchment it was written plain. The squad's borrowed magic hit 267,878, and the girl swore she already knew. The girl snaps that compared to yesterday, the magic supply has already dwindled. Then Guy explodes with a curse, realizing the thief keeps coming back for seconds by siphoning their magic again. Misei stares at the parchment and realizes she never caught any of this before. She didn't even bother counting the magic power they burned through, yet somehow it still feels wildly strange to her. She broke it down. Their squad, the bracelets, and even their magic power could recover from nature on their own. So she insisted that cutting the borrowed magic any further would be pointless. Guy snapped to his feet and demanded what she meant, but Misei shot back that even she couldn't quite piece together what was going on. Elle demanded, "So how much longer do we have to live on these potions?" Because she swore they worked wonders and the price was anything but cheap. Misei shot up from her chair and told them to hang tight for now because she'd worked it out. If each of them downed 45 bottles to refill their strength, then the magic they lost would hit zero. Elle started yelling that she wasn't drinking a single more sip, then begged Guy to finish it all for her. So Guy snapped, furious, and demanded what kind of nonsense she thought she was spewing. Misei, totally against expectations, latched onto the girl's words like they were the first real clue. That middle-aged man the Heavenly Sword team used to meet sat there, puffing on smoke in total quiet. Right when he was quietly disappearing into his own thoughts, Mesa snapped his name, and it cut through the silence. She stormed in wearing daring outfits and grilled their grandpa, asking if he remembered her. He figured they belonged to that squad, and Misei's heart leapt when he actually remembered them. The girl abruptly slid up on both sides of him and in a soft voice pleaded that they truly needed his help, needed him. Grandpa couldn't believe the girls were putting him under that kind of pressure. He was stunned. He never saw it coming. First they chased him out of their team and then they stormed back and asked him for something. At the next table, hidden behind the big picture, Guy sat there with a look that screamed pure disgust, and it all came flooding back. Misei laid the whole scheme out on her terms, and Maria, the one who could strip magic, only stole a specific amount. She barely left her seat and still dropped a bombshell. She wanted the whole team to crank up their magic supply, and all they needed was to snag a new recruit with a huge magic stat. The guy grinned at the plan, convinced it would shrink the other's grip, and Elle leaned in like, "This girl's a genius." When they pulled out the old man's parchment from their recent visit, it hit them, they couldn't move without him. And once they decided he was the key, they tracked him down fast and locked onto their next target. Misei leaned in with a teasing voice and begged him for an answer, pressing herself as close as she dared, praying her plan would finally click. She clung to the hope and pushed every last bit of effort into making it work. The old man himself sat there with red cheeks, straining to lift his eyes upward. Suddenly, a tight little group of adventurers burst in from behind, turning to the old man, who lit up because the team had finally shown up. The guy asked who those girls were standing beside him, and the old man snapped back that they were nobody, then leaned in like he had something important to ask. Misei snapped, demanding to know if he was no longer free. Then the man shot back that it wasn't exactly that simple. The old man leaned in and let it slip that the whole guild already knew the Heavenly Sword team was trapped under a strange curse. And the mock in his tone was so loud that, just by looking at him, you could tell exactly how far that team had fallen. He blurted out an apology and swore he'd never get mixed up with people like that, because to him, it was like willingly grabbing their curse and handing himself the backlash, and he didn't need that at all. Rumors, nobody needs those. Misei erupted into loud complaints, Elle scrambled to calm her, and Guy clenched his teeth with rage. Because they'd been humiliated worse than ever before, they couldn't even believe what they were hearing, and all they wanted was to smash something. The guy's eyes snapped to the talk behind him. She mocked the whole situation, telling him to look, because they never accepted her and now they're down on their knees begging. She snapped that the team shouldn't have strutted around like they owned the place. And the guy beside her joked that they'd probably upset someone big time because now the curse had found them. The girl let out a long sigh and admitted she'd liked them at first, but the man cut in and said their moment was already over. Then both of them shrugged, not caring what happened to the team because they knew it was all their fault. A guy slipped up behind him and snapped, asking if he was talking about them. Then rage surged through his veins, and every word and move screamed that he was one hard hit on the table away from shutting them up. Yanking the man by his clothes, he snarled and blasted out loud, then barked, "Why are you spouting nonsense? Is your time up already?" Elle tried to grab him and stop him too. Suddenly, the administrator snapped to life and addressed the unstoppable Skysword squad. The girl grinned and said, "I got your question, now I've got Mr. Rent's location." Misei and Guy came barreling in out of nowhere, rude as ever, and demanded to know where he was. The girl snapped back that Mr. Rent was posted up in Melba. The girl gasped when the guy actually headed straight for the city of the Great Labyrinth. Misei can't believe how he ended up this far, and then Guy drops his jaw, shrugs, and basically says he doesn't give a damn. He set out to find him and crush him with his own hands, eyes blazing, rage burning, willing to destroy anything that got in his way, praying that the guy would finally look straight at him. Guy burst out of the bushes at the end of his journey. The fairy snapped in a high-pitched shout, telling everyone they'd finally found the entrance to the third level. Rent says that just up ahead, the monsters crank up and get way deadlier, so he's gonna be sweating like crazy more than ever before. Level 3 Wraith Cave, recommended adventurer, rank D. Marie said she could feel a trap lurking here, like the dim light itself was warning her of danger in every shadowed hallway. The girl jolted to attention, loving the heavy, gloomy vibe like it was calling her. Finally, something that felt straight out of a classic dungeon, and Rent looked mortified at the whole thing. Then out of nowhere, he backed her plan, and it hit him that he was actually starting to love this dungeon view too. His own heart started racing, and the fairy shot back that she felt the exact same way. Barely dodging at the last second, the protagonist snaps forward with the dagger and drives it straight into the skeleton's core. Right out of nowhere, the enemy crumpled. And when Rent realized the monsters on this dungeon level hunt by sound, the fairy chimed in with a plan. They could actually talk in their minds, so the boy just froze in shock when a voice popped up in his head. Mappy snapped him out of it, then told him, "Don't worry, you can do it too." He tried to speak to her, and the fairy snapped back that she could hear him. Then the guardian fired off, offended, that she should have told him about that power on the trip. Moppy just burst into laughter and hurriedly apologized. As the team pushed deeper onto the floor, the fairy practically burst with joy. This level was way cooler than the ones before. These caves are a maze, so he has to stay on his toes or get jumped from the shadows. Rent hit them with the Detect Presence spell. While he scanned the results, he spotted adventurers battling a monster nearby, so he dropped everything and decided to study it up close. In the blink of an eye, the main character sprinted off, and it instantly threw his companion into confusion because they just had to know what was going on. Rent figured they were irregulars, and when the fairy didn't get it, he broke it down. Those monsters were built different, way too tough for the dungeon's usual level, and in rare cases, demons from the deeper floors would crash onto the upper ones. That was the monster the boy was marching straight toward. Mappy could tell his master wanted to jump in and back up those poor guys, and he even murmured an apology for how soft-hearted he couldn't help being. But the magical planner didn't even blink. She could feel exactly how this would turn into a win for her. Rent bolted around the corner and collided with strangers, and the warrior barked, "What are you doing? Why are you running around here?" The guy stumbled into non-stop apologies, and while they argued, the magician shoved his friend along, and the healer hauled him right with him. The girl seethed at their escape, but the warrior insisted it was the only way to live, and the magician could only hope that fate would shine for them somewhere else. As the strangers walked off, the fairy leaned in and demanded of Rent, "Were these the very adventurers who got attacked?" The keeper swore these weren't the same ones, but he still caught an irregular trail, and that only meant one thing: someone had stayed behind. Moppy figured a runner failed to break free. Then the guy raced ahead, but right after, the path slammed into a dead end. But when he looked closer, he realized this wasn't just any wall. The whole thing was built with magic, not stone, and when he pressed his hand to it, the surface was warm, like it had been made days ago. The trap was built by a bunch of adventurers the protagonist just blundered into, and once Rent clocked it, he shoved his companion aside and blasted a fireball, cracking the wall to pieces. Once the dust finally cleared, a monster, well, a four-armed skeleton loomed in front of the main character, and before he could even catch his breath, the fairy snapped him straight to the battered warrior who was barely standing. The girl refused to quit, threw her voice at the sky, and screamed at the monster to strike. While she battled another monster, the man kept urging her to move faster, so she took his advice, pushed harder, and even apologized for her mistake. The mage cast healing magic on the guy, then laughed it off. "It took forever, huh?" And when the mage shrugged it away like it was nothing, the joke landed anyway. The whole crew was ready to smash through to the third level today, and the mage didn't even flinch. He had plenty of magic for now, as long as they didn't run straight into a brutal horde of creatures. The girl dug deep, begged for real help, but her companions didn't plan to waste a single ounce of magic on some tiny scratch. That other girl barely saw any value in Rinka, then only gave her a timid little push, while the warrior moped and apologized, defeated. The team pointed at Rinka and said it was all on her that they were still stuck in rank D, then demanded she stay out of the battles again. She only bowed her head and apologized. But her apologies only poured fuel on her companion's rage. because instead of sorry, it felt like all she offered was, try harder. Then, out of nowhere, something scared the guys out of their skin. That mage had no clue what monster stood in front of him, so he hesitated and figured it had to be the boss on the third level, until his friend's instinct snapped into place and he blurted that it was an irregular. The man barked her name, but the girl refused to fold. This time, she wasn't about to let her team down. He nodded along in a weird, unsettling way, then told her she'd be really useful, one last time, so Rinka pushed to ask him again because she still had no clue what he meant. While she battled the monster, she didn't even clock that her team was pulling back, until the wall slammed up and the man grabbed his friends and hustled them out because it was time to leave. Rinka could barely throw up a guard in time and she couldn't believe it. Those enemies had decided to wall her in, right alongside the boss. Pushing away the sting of being left behind, the girl told herself she wasn't abandoned at all. She was just buying her team time to escape safely. Rinka reminded herself that her own team called her the weak link holding them back, and she vowed to fight to the very end. The warrior lunged for the kill, but her blade just couldn't take another hit, and her mind screamed no as death crept in. Right at the last second, an explosion ripped through the air, blasting the skeleton clean off his feet. The fairy started needling the monster, practically daring him to say whether he liked that fireball or not. Without even pausing, the guy asked if she was okay and promised to help, but Rinka spotted something moving and snapped at the rescuer that the skeleton was still alive. He realized this wasn't just an ordinary skeleton, so with every other door shut, he knew he only had one move left. Rent hurled a fireball to knock the enemy down, then there it was, the core. He went for it with his dagger, but the spell just wouldn't come in time. Mappy's worry gnawed at her, but the master calmed her down. Everything was mostly fine. Then the monster thundered toward Rent with a brutal roar, and the boy spotted its weak spot and lined up to end it with one single blow. The protagonist slammed into spell magic, and with a surge of power he geared up to obliterate the enemy. Rent ripped a fireball into the monster, so massive it was 20 times bigger than him. The four-armed skeleton crumpled under the main character's strike and finally went down for good. At the market, folks were buzzing about the A-rank squad meteor shower hitting Melba, and they couldn't decide whether to risk it and go. Roger, the meteor shower squad's very own, was out there signing autographs at that exact moment. A stranger shoved up to him and asked him to sign his shirt. Roger froze, stunned to the bone, but the fan swore he'd turn it into his travel talisman, and the man agreed on the spot. Right then, Roger was suddenly called out. Comet from the meteor shower squad leaned in and warned the man, eat your rice or she'd snatch it away. The adventurer told him to hang on and promised he'd be done in a sec, but the girl had zero patience for anything to dry. Nymeria, rocking her meteor shower squad pride, winked and purred that Roger was still as famous as ever. Jin, a meteor shower squad member, rallied the group and swore they'd conquer the Great Labyrinth. Then he looked up and asked if the Lord would smile on them, and the guys backed him hard, with at least one of them throwing down a bet on their win. The adventurer snapped back. This wasn't a money bet at all, while, amid the roaring chatter, Fuga from the meteor shower squad just sipped his tea in grim silence. Then bam. A whole team burst out of the labyrinth shouting that disaster was waiting inside. An odd intruder showed up in the Great Labyrinth on the third floor, like a skeleton with two pairs of arms, and the man spelled it out clearly. Roger's brain instantly snapped to the truth, a four-armed skeleton. A worried girl burst up to the adventurers, demanding to know if everyone was safe and where they'd met him. She swore a strike team would be sent there right away. The trio reassured her she was safe, but they wouldn't say the same for their friend. The man insisted that Rinka baited him, buying them time to bolt, and the girl just couldn't wrap her head around the shock she'd heard. Next, she pushed to figure out if their companion was dead, but as soon as the man understood what she meant, his spirit sank. Then he admitted in a hopeless tone that chances were she wasn't alive anymore. The girl heard his doubts and spun around to her colleague, snapping, "Check the labyrinth, anything alive." Her colleague jumped into action at once, scanning the maze and demanding the victim's name. Her companions couldn't help but remember her with heartbreak, because Rinka never wanted to hurt a single soul, and just then the man got a report. Everyone lit up with the good news. The girl was still alive, and someone shouted that they had to go after her right now. The team erupted in disbelief at the news, certain she couldn't be alive since they'd trapped their companion away. Yet she caught their weird whispers, and Roger stepped in with total confidence to cut off every conversation. The meteor shower squad is charging in to wipe out the irregular and bring Rinka back safe. The girl spun toward the group unsure, and Roger quickly shot down their worries, telling her they hadn't been in the labyrinth for ages, so they could take a quick trip first to get their bearings, because Comet was already itching to have a blast. People started whispering because a team this promising was stepping in, and it lit a spark of hope in everyone. Then someone blurted out, "No help needed." Rent had already crushed the monster, and now he was hauling the girl out of the labyrinth safe, unhurt, and breathing easy, while Rinka's team burst out screaming her name in pure panic. The protagonist struck the irregular down hard, then only one thing remained, a massive magic stone. Then Roger stepped in and demanded, wide-eyed with awe, wait, was it really Rent? The Guardian brightened up the second he spotted an old acquaintance he hadn't seen in forever. Then the man went straight for the question, asking who the girl beside Rent really was. Rinka leaned in and told him the truth, that he was the one who helped her break free. People all around him started chanting that he was the coolest, and then the guy went hysterical, screaming at the keeper, was it you who came through and passed us? Jin cut him off, shoved the idea in his head, and told him to thank Rent for saving his friend. But the main character shot back dead serious. No way, they needed Rinka as bait, and the man stared at him in shock, asking again. Namiria questioned the bait like something smelled off, and the girl snapped back that her team swore she stayed by choice. The warrior then threw on a fake meltdown, yelling that it all played out exactly like he said, while calling the keeper's accusations pure lies. Rent told the girl to stare at a magical wall. These three conjured it out of thin air and sealed Rinka's escape route. If you study the stone, you'll even spot who cast the spell. People started slamming him for what he'd done, so in sheer panic he grabbed the girl and demanded she confirm her team wasn't lying. While this whole time, he was the one who made everything up. Adventurers are pure gamble. Nobody can promise they'll even see tomorrow, so they throw their full trust into their party, but this trio. All they've ever gotten is betrayal and being left behind. Roger had already decided this team didn't deserve to exist, until someone tapped him on the shoulder. After trading a tense silence with Fook, the adventurer finally cooled off. The worker demanded to know if they had some excuse, but Roger cut him off and refused to get deeper into it, then pushed them to go hunting for a fresh start, and Jean backed him up. Then the man leaned in and asked Rent if the keeper would be free the day after tomorrow evening. Only Rent didn't get what he meant, and before anything could click, Roger had already snapped his goodbyes and headed out. Namiria waved him off, promising to catch him at the next meeting. Jin praised him for his killer work, and then Comet shoved right past him, acting like the keeper was blocking the passage. Fuga stayed quiet, apologizing for the girl's mess, but the guy didn't even flinch. Then Mappy glanced over and said they were a loud crowd, and Rent just kept laughing, no fight, no argument, because this was the Meteor Shower Squad. Rinka and Ren stepped up to answer the questions about what happened, and once the whole process was done, the worker bowed in thanks for their cooperation. While that crystal kept glowing blue the entire time, proving their testimony was the real deal. The girl couldn't stand it. She had to know what happened to her old squad, especially since they were locked up in a separate room getting interrogated. And because of what they did and her own false report to the guild, everyone was staring down serious prison time. And that's not just a punishment. It's a lifelong ban from adventurers, leaving them trapped in the mines for years on end. Rinka stared at it all, then just shrugged and said, yeah, I get it. The girl thanked Ren again for helping her, and the guy just couldn't figure out what she'd do next. Until it hit him. She had nothing planned because their team had fallen apart by itself. The keeper brightened her day, then jabbed a finger at the massive sack of money they'd just hauled in by wiping out that skeleton. Rent said it was all because of her, and he insisted he had to repay her somehow, so shyly tried to wave him off, but he wouldn't let it go. The guy finally admitted that his own partners had ditched him. Rinka's eyes went wide. Then the keeper smirked and said that since they'd tracked him here, he could at least hear her gripe. After they slid into their seats at the tavern, the girl told him she'd been dumped for the 7th time, and he could barely wrap his head around how that was even possible. She finally chose honesty and admitted her heart was shattering, but not because of any rejection, it was for something totally different. Rinka snatched the gift, the Path of Usura, yet it still wouldn't let her escape the battlefield, and the guy couldn't stop staring, shocked by how rare it was since it was unlike anything else. She snapped that it was all just words, then admitted she felt weak since she couldn't even handle her own sword, but still, that gift drove her to fight. Her fate is locked in, she'll fight until the final breath. And that boy, his gift hurts too. When Rent turned useless, his old partners bilaid on him, and the Guardian tore himself up with shame over his own weakness. But that gift might also be his lifeline. An infinite magic storage, the very same unique skill Rinka has, so she weighed his words, wondering if she could one day stand as strong and confident as him. Ren dropped the idea on Rinka, form a team, and her shock hit instantly, but then he explained it plainly. His power is all about supporting others, so with them side by side they'll click. She remembered every ounce of the mocking, especially the words from her final order. Then she swallowed her pride and apologized for refusing, because teaming up with her would only drag the keeper down, so she decided she'd work alone. When she spotted a creature nobody had ever seen before, fear slammed into her and she shrieked, "There are relics." Mappy shot over to Rinka and introduced herself, telling her she'd come to help Mr. Rent while that poor boy was still reeling from the sudden scream. The girl still couldn't believe her eyes when a fairy Mappy showed up, then it quickly apologized for spooking her. At first, she was only visible to the Guardian of Magic, but once he sharpened his powers, she could finally appear to whoever she chose. Rinka had zero reason to sweat. Rent would never judge her because she was a smart, unstoppable investment. Rinka froze in fear, totally lost at what Mappy was even saying, so the main character snapped, demanding to know what he meant, only for her to smile and insist it was a compliment, and then Rent started putting it all together. If Rinko teams up with that guy, she'll get way stronger. And if that happens, Rent will grow right alongside her too. That's the whole point of the Keeper of Magic's gift, and when she asked hesitantly if she really would become stronger, he shot back a confident, yes. What? When Rinka still wouldn't buy it, the Keeper pushed a risky idea, try his plan for just one day. And after thinking back on everything Rent had done for her before, she finally nodded and chose to trust him, because he'd saved her once already. She'd give it her all, then they headed to the guild together and marched straight up to the administrator. The company filed its unit and christened it Double Deviation. After the payment landed, the seller slid over 20 restorative potions, then turned to Misei and reluctantly hissed a warning. This potion surges magic into you like a spark. Then if you lean on it too much, one day those side effects finally come knocking. The magician bristled because the seller kept lecturing her, insisting he barely used it, and when she just smirked and strutted off, the guy finally, and weirdly, noticed this was how it always went. The express wagon bound for Melba was about to roll out, and right at the last second the men inside clocked the party. There was the two-headed silver wolf. With a B-rank squad riding with them, everyone felt safe as we speak, until another team closed in, and Guy wouldn't let it go as he demanded they swap spots with Distra and Sinistra, the Silver Wolf Squad's two-headed duo. El envidio el lugar blandido don si habían acomodado, y me sé si cuido de las zonas malasmas que les toco. Hasta los del grupo de los espadachines exigeran que los cambiaran. The siblings instantly clocked them as the Boundless Sky Sword Squad, and people were calling them the fastest-growing B-rank crew in history. Guy also figured out who was ahead of him, because the person always dragged themselves along at the far end of the B rank. Roly, one of the two-headed silver wolf, couldn't take the swordsman's insults anymore, so she snapped, but that still didn't stop Guy. Then Distra and Sinistra stepped in and offered to switch places, yet the girls on their team clearly had no clue what was really driving them. They cleared the way for that amazing squad, and once it was done, the insults started flying right back at them. Surika, part of the two-headed silver wolf squad, never really trusted those three, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the leader's call was dead wrong. This is an express carriage. Hit the road and you'll reach your destination in half the time of a high-speed coach, because it screams along deadly routes regular carriages wouldn't dare touch. Whoever's sitting at the very end of that carriage, the way everyone quietly agrees, serves as the guardian of the whole journey. Their crew grabbed a dangerously responsible assignment and didn't even realize it. Sarika erupted at the trio's carelessness, but Sinistra calmly told her a rank B squad wouldn't be that reckless. Shannon, the two-headed Silver Wolf's member, sat there thinking hard, then realized she didn't exactly like them. Right then, the cart thundered through a creepy forest, and the guards watching the road were so on edge it felt like their nerves might snap. Suddenly, a sharp voice rang out, blasting a warning to everyone riding the cart: orcs ahead. By the time it was their turn, the monsters had already torn into the convoy, so one soldier screamed at the adventurers, "3 orcs are here. We need reinforcements right now." The wolves had a mission to finish. Roly got yanked awake in the rudest way by another squad, and Guy couldn't figure out what they wanted from them at all. Then the brother and sister finally let it slip. It was time for the guardians of the whole journey to step out and reveal themselves in all their glory. In this battle, the high orcs were the ones facing them, and the B-rank units should have crushed these brutes without breaking a sweat. The right monster charged the two-headed wolf, the left lunged for the sword of the boundless sky, and the one in the middle smashed straight into the convoy. A dense, pitch-dark forest surrounded the adventurers, so they had to smash the enemies fast before anything else crawled out. And Distra and his crew were going to handle it quick, like they always did. Sarika blasted her allies with acceleration magic. Then Roly surged in and smashed the orc's head to steal his focus. The twins snapped their blades into position and unleashed the chains of humility. Then Shannon roared and hurled a raging fire tornado straight at the enemy. The wolves finished the job in just 7 seconds solid, but not a world record. And as the timer ticked, the soldiers lunged at the orc, only to spark rage in the monster. Watching the convoy's attempts crumble, Distra and Sinistra snapped into action with their paired silver scissors move and crushed the enemy, saving the day. The soldiers cheered their rescuers, but Raleigh wasn't satisfied for a second. Guy shoved the demand down Elle's throat, begging her to use her amplification magic. Yet Elle couldn't cast a thing because she hadn't even swallowed the potion, and 1 bottle later Misei was already hit with nausea. The swordsman snapped at his companions for being useless, but the crowd had no clue what this team was even trying to pull off. The orc was closing in fast, and the girls begged Guy to fix this, yet Guy feared that potion wouldn't kick in soon enough. The warrior couldn't finish the potion, telling himself nobody would strip his skills. Then the orc stepped in and proved just how much stronger it was. Misei started to spiral in doubt, because back when they'd been here, they slaughtered those orcs by the droves. Yet Guy just shut her down, refusing to hear her anguish, because all he cared about was using his power to the absolute fullest. The swordsman chased his magic, and while he was stuck in his head, the twins tore through the final enemy. The fight finally ended, and the road opened up. People erupted into applause for the heroes straight from the carriage. The siblings shot Guy's crew an apology for getting in the way, but they insisted they were only guarding the carriage and doing their job. The swordsman just shook it off, saying they didn't need that help, because Guy figured they could handle it all on their own. The twins hit the breaking point, and with sharp sarcasm they said they'd actually choose to believe the warrior's words, if he could back them up. As they walked away, both warned him that reputation could shatter in a heartbeat. Guy shoved back with a challenge, but the moment he realized his own wound was bleeding, he went dead silent. Seeing the blood, Sinistra told Sarika to heal them. Sarika didn't want to burn her precious magic, but she still nodded and did it. The soldiers didn't trust a word, thinking the illiterate Sky Sword had to be sitting with the B-rank squad leaders. Then Rolly caught the rumors firsthand, and yeah, they were real. They're stuck spellless, unable to use skills, yet if they're going to brag about their rank, then they'd better prove they can fight even without them. Sarika snapped at the team to move, because if they didn't get out right now, more monsters were going to come crashing in. People leaned in, chattering non-stop as they traded excited whispers about the three adventurers heading down the road. He was convinced that without that mark, they would have crushed it. Misei pointed the finger at the protagonist like it was all his fault, and the swordsman seethed with even more fury, spitting out Rent with pure disgust. The new squad is officially registered. Melba's double deviation is locked in, and the squad level is set to F with its F members Rent and Rin Ka. On his screen, the system flashed that he'd officially joined the second squad. Then it confirmed his skill growth was unlocked, and his lending magic jumped straight up to level 2. Rent somehow learned auto-compensation, so when a debtor's magic drops past a set point, the skill kicks in and instantly hands the target magical power. Now that he's the Guardian, he doesn't have to keep measuring his companions' magic power mid-battle anymore. Rinka shoots the guy a grateful nod for the repair fluid he loaned her, then slaps it onto her armor and boom, everything looks brand new again. Rent's thrilled he could help, but there's way more coming. The girl stared in disbelief and demanded Rent, so he told her the truth. She'd shattered her sword in the last fight, and the guy hauled out the skeleton's weapon, melted it down, and had the blacksmith forge her a brand new blade. Everything was already paid for, so the swordswoman didn't have to do anything. She just grabbed it for herself. The girl's aura erupted into something totally unrecognizable, and the blacksmith could feel it hit him straight in the chest. Rent leaned in and asked the girl what she thought of the sword. Rinka lit up with joy, because now she could slice through absolutely anything. The swordswoman thanked her companion, and right then the man couldn't tell if he'd imagined it or not. In that blink, the blacksmith seemed like the most terrifying swordsman in the entire world. The team barreled back into Melba's massive labyrinth. Only this time, they charged straight for the second level. The girl decided to lay it all out to the keeper again, because the most valuable power she had was self-enhancement, pumping magical power into herself to get stronger. Once you trigger the skill, every last drop of magic gets drained, no more spells, until the enemy right in front of you is finally wiped out. When the sword kicks on, it starts with 7 units, and after that it burns through 1 unit every 10 seconds. Her supply maxes out at 10, so she can fire this ability for a full 40 seconds. Mappy made it crystal clear. As long as the party member's magic didn't run dry, her skill wouldn't get cut off. Wrench was absolutely convinced. His magic borrowing skill plus that fresh auto-compensation had to do it, but Wrencha, he wasn't buying it for a second. The goblin blasted his horn the moment he spotted the strangers, and Rent rushed in, trying to teach the girl magic and urging her to trust him. From the first clash to the final slash, Rinka's sword will cut through everything, wrecked to the bone. That's Usura's way. The main character hit the *** auto-compensation ** skill, and suddenly the world tilted. Magic dropped under *9 units *, like it was * on lone *. The girl tore through her enemies at breakneck speed, wiping them out one after another. While Rinka's trial battle raged on, the Guardian of Magic couldn't even begin to guess the real strength she was hiding. The swordswoman snapped aside from the arrows, then sprinted up the tree and slammed the attackers down. Her gift is no joke. This power is off the charts. The only catch, it guzzles magic like crazy, so it's no wonder an average squad can't even scratch the surface of what she can do. 1 measly unit of magic every 10 seconds. That's a fantasy she's clinging to, yet you just know she'll grow stronger in the future, and the world will demand even more from her. It's probably not only about getting better at something, it's about her all the way down. Rinka met that hulking goblin head-on and with one lightning-fast slash, dropped it in a single blow. Rent stared in shock as the girl breezed in. Her cool skills sliced through every goblin, and they were all gone in just a couple minutes. In a daze, the swordswoman lunged at the main character. Then consciousness crashed back in, and Rinka snapped to it, recognizing the guy. Since she hadn't touched that skill in ages, she crumpled from exhaustion and begged for her forgiveness. The boy awkwardly clocked that the swordswoman had closed the distance too fast. Then she jolted back, embarrassed, and started apologizing, while Mopey just watched from the sidelines and mocked her companions. The guild weighed Rent Squad's haul and did the math. 1,043 goblin magic stones came out to a jaw-dropping 104,300 gold. The goblin chieftain's magic stones cash out for 9,000 gold. And those goblin seeds you snagged by wiping out a colony, 18 of them, hit a massive 36,000 gold. The guild announced the reward, and right then Rinka burst out to the keeper, shouting that, just today, her max magic had jumped by 4 whole units. She beamed at her and said, "You've done it." And the girl confessed that over the last 3 years she'd only pulled off 2 units, so the swordswoman felt nothing but pure gratitude as she agreed to rent. Rinka only got help from him, but she powered through the real work all on her own. And when it was over, she flat out admitted she still can't believe any of it really happened. But the Keeper of Magic watched it all unfold, and he couldn't stop raving. It was pure magnificence. The fighter girl was straight up unmatched, she should be proud, and when she heard his words, she got genuinely moved. Just when they were about to go, the fairy blared to a stop. Moppy rushed in, ready to tell them the lone news for Mrs. Rinka today. Since the skill fires just once, it chews through 126 units total, activating for 1 hour and 21 minutes, using 1 unit every 40 seconds, which adds up to 490. After crunching every last number, the fairy finally nailed 616 units, and the swordswoman nodded right along. Rinka swore she'd grow stronger and crush that debt, and right after that, the fairy leaned in and grilled her about the interest rate. Staring at them, Rent couldn't help but wonder when someone last thanked him for helping out. Then the keeper snapped back, remembering how his old comrades had valued him from the very start. This time, the protagonist refused to repeat the old mistakes, because they were going to stand strong together. The girl snapped the guy out of his headspace by saying, "Let's celebrate the squad's creation," and they treated him to a seriously delicious meal. In Melba's great labyrinth on the 8th floor of Dragon Mountain, the adventurers finally smashed the dragon to pieces. Jin fumed because the scales were rock hard and wouldn't budge, and then Fuga hit him with it. This request clearly called for 30 pieces. The warrior had no clue that hunting scales would be harder than slaying the dragon. Then he shifted to the girls and demanded help. But Nymeria dodged the grind and Comet flat-out refused to play the laborer. Roger burst out of the dragon and tore away the dragon's liver, handing it straight to Jin. The warrior snapped at Roger for his carelessness, and the moment Roger started to apologize, strange worms crawled out behind him. A parasite lurking inside the dragon had seized Nymeria and Comet, and the girls weren't asking. They were demanding to be freed. Right now, Fuke kept on scooping up scales like the whole chaos never even happened. The main character asked her out for dinner, right under a meteor shower. Then she shut him down cold, saying she was just a low-ranking adventurer. Then Rinka demanded to know how he knew them, and the answer hit hard. Ren's old squad was already turning heads, so they'd been grabbing drinks with them again and again. The swordswoman prayed this guy would have a great night, and when Rent finally slipped into the bar, he remembered the last time he and Roger grabbed a drink together. It had been ages. He couldn't wait, but nerves still crawled up his spine. Then the girl hurriedly apologized to the keeper for showing up late. Rent froze when he saw Nymeria in a dress, especially since her whole team was out on a mission that day. The mage laughed and said seeing him was reason enough to get dressed, then leaned in to ask what he thought of the outfit. Rent swallowed hard and admitted with a shy grin that it was beautiful. Nymeria got a smack across the head from Roger for hugging the guardian. The warrior demanded to know what kind of ugly outfit this was, and when the girl even managed to change into it. But she just shrugged, said it hurt, and told Roger he couldn't understand beauty because Rent liked the outfit. Once they finally sat down, the warrior leaned in and said he'd heard a ton of rumors about the boys' squad. Then he grilled the keeper straight to the point about why the boy got left out. Roger felt for Rent's pain, then tried to lift his spirits with a drink, only for the protagonist to shoot it down fast, apologizing and insisting this wasn't the moment to be drinking. Nymeria slammed the story as awful. How do you kick out a friend after 5 whole years? Then Roger chimed in, saying lately it's nothing but their failures, and apparently everything only stayed together because Renta was holding it up. Turns out this guy can store magic, and his old squad totally forgot they'd been putting all their hopes on him, because they shot straight to B rank faster than anyone, and that's why Roger looked at the whole lot and decided they were narcissists. Now that Rent looks back, it hits him. He was the one hanging on to them, not the other way around. In all their adventures, the keeper just kept handing over his magic, and the boy never once thought to forge his own path. He totally earned that expulsion back then. His short-sighted mistakes were the real problem. Roger snapped to it. Rent wasn't a kid anymore, and it shocked him. And from her side, their leader felt way more childish than the one guarding her, while the guy clearly got stung by every word. Nymeria leaned in and spilled it to Rent. Dragons only show up on the Great Labyrinth's 8th level, right as the meteor shower is blasting, and according to Roger, these lizard monsters can stir up trouble fast. After that, the girl grabbed the chance and told the main character everything about the dragon parasites. No matter how hard the man tried to shut her down, he still couldn't stop her. Rent knows Roger and Nymeria are the kind of legends you'll never match, yet they still trade tales like they're just buddies on the same level. The main character's locked in, he's chasing his dream to become an adventurer, just like the meteorite shower. Roger declared that his team was storming the whole 8th level, and the second the words left his mouth, the keeper instantly clocked the meaning. Then the man snapped, confirmed it. The squad charged straight into the Great Labyrinth of Melba, determined to crush through its deepest level. That lowest layer, the car, is the holy grail most adventurers chase with everything they've got. Roger pressed the girl for the exact number of levels in the labyrinth, but she had nothing precise to give, so the man told them to stop guessing, dive straight to the bottom, and figure it out for themselves. By this time, Rent had finally snapped to the fact that he still had crucial news to drop. The guy bragged that he'd built a brand new squad with Rinka, and together they brought a rare gift that dragged trouble in their wake. Nymeria instantly liked the name, while Roger started imagining what this new squad would look like. Now Roger and Rent are rivals. Then right as they head out, the guy tells him thanks for the treat, and that sparks Roger's idea. Let's team up. Nymeria snapped at the man for dodging the real reason they were meeting. Yet Roger couldn't bring the boy into their party because the keeper had already claimed him for his own plan. Roger once knew a guy. He survived as a ruthless loan shark and trusted nobody, not even the world. He raked in cash, sure, but he also had enemies crawling all over the place, and in the end, someone finally put a knife in him. Rent had a gift like that too. Depending on the situation, someone might even lend extra, but that's exactly where the trap was. And Roger was terrified it would all go wrong sooner than he could stop it. But now the man is convinced the keeper has everything under control, that it'll all turn out fine, yet he can't shake the fact he wanted to hear his companion's thoughts, and she's nowhere to be found. Nymeria pushed him to keep talking at the bar, but he panicked. If he came back too late, he'd wake Rinka, and that would be a disaster. When the girl grilled him about what they were, Rint finally shrugged it off and said, "We're just friends." The man soothed Nymeria like he did the first time, and while they were still bickering, the keeper finally snapped back to reality. He had a favor he needed to ask both of them. Mappy realized it had already been 3 weeks since she and the gentleman landed in Melba, and now they've got every last detail on the debtors. The Central Information Bureau is basically unstoppable. Inside the guild, they crank out a spit-roasted feast. Minced meat gets fried in batter, then served hot and glorious, and Rinka can't stop smiling as she digs in. This stew is the pride of Nelba's guilds. Once she casts the skill, the swordswoman drops straight into a death-by-hunger frenzy, then devours everything like there's no tomorrow. The fairy told them a growing creature has to chow down non-stop, and right after that, Mopey leaned in and reminded the girl she still had to show Mr. Rent something. Rinka Rosenrank climbed from F to E, and the Guardian couldn't stop smiling. Those results happened in just 4 days, and her magic jumped up to 24 units too. That sword-wielding woman has been nursing a grudge against her own gift for ages. But now she's ready to step out as a true adventurer, and it's all because of the main character. For a while, Rent treated his gift just like everything else. But lately, the fairy switched things up and decided to craft something special for Rinka. Mappy pushed a sizzling, crispy crust into her hands, the tastiest bite ever, and the swordswoman only hesitated for a second before one taste annihilated every doubt she had. The schemers fed the shock drinker a shill, but the war only drew in rents they hadn't seen in ages. The Guardian shrugged and asked what that warrior even needed, since their paths had already split, and those words lit a fire of rage in the warrior. Everything spiraled for the trio the second the guy began snatching their magic, and Missy blamed the mess on Rent. But the protagonist shut that down fast, saying, "I don't steal magic, I don't take it at all, I lend it." The party would never give up magic on their own, so the Keeper of Magic had to shove them into it, whether they wanted to or not. But the moment the mage spotted the swordswoman, he bolted over to learn her identity. Rinka quickly said she was an adventurer who works with Ren, yet Missy didn't buy the girl's claim about the guy right away. The team started snickering at their former teammate, but the swordswoman stepped in and defended him. Missy hated the girl's stares, so she made them look away. Rent demanded it stop, and then Guy finally moved. Roger stormed up to them and demanded, "If you're fighting, then take it outside." The warrior tried to figure out why that man was there, but Roger brushed him off, too busy glaring at the food that had just landed on the floor. The guy snagged the man's attention and accused Ren of stealing their magic, because the boy got kicked out of the squad. Roger echoed exactly what the keeper had said earlier. Then Missy exploded, furious that the guy was pulling this off without their consent, and the man ran it by Rent, who confirmed it, but warned they'd gone way too aggressive. Roger listened to both sides, then snapped that the fee being too high was just as bad, so he laid out a solution to fix it. Duel, if you want your side to win, you settle it with a fight. Because the man was free, so he got pulled in as the second, and Rinka was totally lost at first. Then the keeper finally broke it down. It was a ritual where two people settle their dispute by beating each other in combat. He was grinning at this chance, because if he pulled off the win, Rent would have to cough up every bit of magic the thief stole to pay them back. And he signed on to whatever the contest threw at him, even when it turned into a brutal 3 versus 1. At that exact moment, Roger and the main character snapped back to their chat from yesterday, because the Guardian had told the man he'd be the second in the duel. His old squad was the enemy, and Roger couldn't shake the feeling. This guy was hunting them down solo. Guy and the crew are heading to Melba before dawn tomorrow, scouting for Rent and pushing straight to the truth. Then the talk turns to a duel, and they flat out ignore Guy until Roger steps in, and suddenly their minds flip. The man couldn't stop wondering how the protagonist nailed the exact arrival time. Rent didn't mention the ferry at all, and instead straight up lied, calling it just a premonition. The organizer declared that Roger would take the stand, and teased that this show was going to be absolutely wild. Misei bristled as a swarm of spectators crowded in, and Guy grinned, saying this was the perfect stage for a duel, and that he was about to show them exactly what he and his team could do. The boy stared in awe at Roger's gift for pulling people in, and just then Jin shot him a good luck wish, making the keeper feel ridiculously grateful. Jin had already dumped every last coin of his week into the rent, so that guy had no way to fail, and then he slipped right back into betting again. The organizer grabbed Mr. Renty and the man from the Sword of the Boundless Sky, and demanded they shout out their bets for the duel. The guy spoke for the squad and swore that if they won, the Guardian would instantly stop draining their magic power. So now the spotlight was on the protagonist. If Rent pulls off the win, he slams the interest rate up on every piece of magic he gathers. Right now it's 8% for 10 days, and afterward it jumps to 10%. That magic power loan gets paid back every month. Starting tomorrow, he'll pocket another 90,000 magic power. That 10% interest would get slapped on top, but he didn't even have a second to say the final price. So Misei guessed, then decided to speak up and clarify it anyway. Every single day, the main character hauled in the interest like clockwork. Those payments weren't optional. Fed up with the waiting, the warrior silenced him on the spot, like a warning that death was seconds away. The organizer snapped for everyone to gather and take an oath, and the guys swore, no matter what, that they'd accept the sacred duel's results. Roger threw his weight into the oath as the second, and when Rinka saw it, worry hit her hard. This was clearly the first time she'd ever witnessed anything like this. An oath sworn in a duel is ironclad. You're not just making a promise, you're locking your fate, and if you break it, serious consequences will come crashing down. They'd never met face-to-face before, but they both recognized the girl standing right there in front of them. Numeria spilled the story of her night with Rent, then decided to pump up the details just enough to tease the girl with a good-natured joke. Rinka didn't catch the joke, and Numeria practically burst with laughter. Rinka just had to trust that guy because he was going to win for sure, and the swordswoman nodded along too. Then out of nowhere, a fairy popped in and dropped a bombshell. Mr. Rent would never lose. Those words shocked the girl, and right then Roger shouted the duel was starting. The crowd's chanting crackles in the air as the duel finally kicks off. Our hero steps up against an armored brute wielding a massive sword, and right behind him, 2 girls stand there, one with dark hair and the other blazing blonde. A dark-haired girl and a guy crack open tiny bottles and drink straight from them. Nobody can figure out why he downs a restoration potion the second the duel kicks off. A white-haired girl named Elle downs drinks right alongside them, and her teammates watch with their hearts in their throats. After she gulps the last drop and pants through it, she declares, "If we finish the hero, then I'm ready to endure it." The hero locks eyes with the group and says he'll wait until they're drunk. Then the armored guy snaps that he's bullying, while the hero grimly remembers they're still surviving on magic. The boy remembers how, once his magic ran dry, they shoved a recovery potion down his throat to refill him, pouring it in like medicine meant to fix everything. And he still spits a curse at the memory of that awful, burning feeling. Blinded by his own thoughts, the boy doesn't even see the knight start his assault. Then a spectator's scream rips him out of his head just in time. The blast slams down right where the guy's standing. Boom. A furious explosion erupts, stones ricochet everywhere, and even a piggy bank-shaped object gets tossed in the chaos, while the watchers get knocked back by the shockwave. The girl gasps, calling out in worried panic. Right after the attack, dust clouds explode into the air, and the pig crumples to the floor. The girl knight freezes in horror, whispers the name Rent. The guy who bet on the boy gets surrounded, and they demand he'll pay it all back with interest. The knight smirks like she already knows he's done for. The knight brags that he ended the boy with one brutal blow. Then the dark-haired girl snaps, calling the boy Guy, saying he went too far. He grins right back and says Elle's defense worked just as well. The guy whips around to Roger and tells him, "We're crazy cool." But the other guy scowls like something's off, and the knight just can't figure out why until he realizes the pig is wrong. A fireball suddenly erupts behind the knight, and the dark-haired girl yells for him to turn, then she slams up a shield in time to save them both, leaving them stunned and scrambling to figure out where that blast even came from. A girl from the crowd blurts out that with Roger, nobody would ever dare mess with the duel. Then the girl and the guy spin around and spot a shadowy figure cutting through the clouds of dust. They snap to it. This is Rent's attack. Then the girl whips up a fire tornado and hurls it straight at him. The hero darts through the smoke, dagger flashing in his hand, and in one brutal move he knocks the sorceress down hard, while the knight roars her name, yelling Mesa. Rent grabs the pig and jolts forward. While the guy screams for Elle to get up, she can't, and he blasts the white-haired girl straight on with a roaring 3x fireball. The crowd watching the fight is blown away. Rent just slammed 3 spells at once, and they were even at a higher level. The same girl from earlier can't stop gushing and urges everyone to watch the hero, while Guy blurts out, "How did you pull that off?" What? With his teeth clenched, Guy starts thinking, "Man, I'm nowhere near as fit as I should be." The knight can't believe it. After his attack, Rent is still standing, completely unharmed. The boy barrels toward them with a pig clutched in one hand and a dagger in the other, while a girl in the crowd with a fairy on her head blurts that Rent is amazing and asks if the magic's infinite storage powered him. Then the fairy sighs, "Yeah, but it took real work." What? At night, she and her boyfriend would sit in the room, scanning what they could buy, grinning because they'd finally saved up enough. And Rent would pick out exactly what he needed to get with it. He snaps up the creditor's protection skill, and once he has it, it stays permanently on. He's convinced this skill locks the duel's outcome in place, no matter what. Though it took forever to pull off, he knows it'll pay off big down the road. Rent makes it clear, no matter how hard the enemy strikes, he'll still trigger that skill and defend himself. While the fight rages, he realizes this power shuts down the debtor's attacks, no matter what they throw at him, until the damage hits that limit. He's convinced the damage they shrug off scales with how much the debtor actually pays. Then Guy charges in and smashes his opponent with a vacuum strike. The sword snaps into reach, but it never cuts him. Calm as can be, Rent stares at the blade by his shoulder, then says it's made of mithril, and watches it crumble to dust, while the boy grins and asks if the knight's actually taking good care of it. The fairy warns those attackers they owe them millions, so Rent will be paid and they're still broke. Then the guy blurts that their only priority is getting their strength back, because there's zero money left to buy more repair fluid. With one snap of his hand, the boy shatters the knight's sword, and before anyone can blink, a chunk of steel tears through the air straight toward them. Right on cue, a masked knight with long white hair catches the flying fragment mid-flight. He stares at the piece, wondering if he can flip it for cash. Guy grips the broken remains of his weapon with trembling hands, stares at his crippled comrades, and erupts in a rage-filled scream. He charges back and screaming that he'll never be beaten by Rent, and boom, another explosion tears through the scene. The guy snaps the punch away and the knight slams to the ground. Then the crowd erupts, screaming they've got a winner, and even declaring Rent is awesome, while the girl who'd been cheering for him can't process what she's seeing. The guy sprawled on his back, groaning in agony, and as he fought through the pain, he spotted the hero stomping closer with a terrifying scowl, looming right over him. Rent orders him to ditch his magic, but when the knight tries to talk back, he only stammers that he's burned through every last skill. Then the hero swings in and boots him straight in the face. The girl with the fairy and the girl beside her stare, locked in, watching everything unfold like it's personal, while Rent lunges in and cuts Guy off, telling him that's just how life is, and driving a dagger toward him. He slams the weapon to the knight's face, blurts that he's got 3 souls now, then can't help wondering what they'll cost, and whether the money will finally wipe out his debt. Rent warns him, if it happens, Guy's soul will break free from the reincarnation cycle and drift through an endless freezing void, then grins like a nightmare while the guy brushes it off as not my problem, and the terrified knight scrambles to stop him. Ren locks eyes with him and the guy stares back like he's seeing a stranger, so he asks, "Who are you?" Ren's face twists into a grimace, then he lets out this uneasy chuckle. In the vision, Rent drops another coin into the piggy bank, shakes it right by his ear, and bam, the pig says he's saved enough, then demands, "Is that amount really enough?" Rent's grin fades as he shakes his head and insists, "No, I want more." He drags the pig to the scene where his old teammates split the cash, and then he flat out tells him they've got everything. With wild, crazed eyes, he lunges at the piles of coins, yells that they're his, and demands they give him everything right now. Someone tries to call him, but he's too deep in counting the money. Then he shoves his attackers back like they don't stand a chance. A girl with a ponytail pulls him out of his trance, cheering like crazy, then wraps her arms around him from behind and screams his hero name. The boy snaps awake and realizes he's on a battlefield, and Renka is clinging to him. She won't let him go, coaxes him to breathe and calm down because he won, and then Renk goes still as the truth hits. He scans the wreckage of battered, scattered opponents sprawled and knocked out across the field, and then Roger barks that the duel is over, declaring Rent the winner, leaving the guy staring around in total bewilderment. Roger strides up to the boy and with a grin declares it was magnificent, then he takes one look at the fallen mess and admits the fight was brutally ruthless, saying he really expected the hero to go in with more care. A girl in a white dress with long black hair says it gave her goosebumps, and Rent just can't follow. He admits he remembers nothing at all. Then, the other friends crowd in and hype it up as so cool. They swore he was a real demon, and when the duel finally ended, he blasted them with a dozen blazing fireballs straight at their faces. The guy blurts out, "No way did you really pull it off." Roger tells Rent, "Don't worry, the enemy's alive and the guild reps will handle it." The dark-haired girl snaps that he could have ended the fight sooner, because it's Rinka who ends up sobbing and Roger fires back, reminding him exactly what he hates the most. Seeing how the defeated get handled, he snaps that he can't stand people who brutalize others after they themselves betrayed them, and he flat out says they deserve every bit of it. The allies lean in and tell Rent that the memory loss happened after pure rage. He snapped and lost control of himself. The boy frowns at them. Ren's mind gets slammed with memories of those miserable days with his old teammates, and suddenly he's sure this is exactly what went down. Right then, that short-haired girl who'd backed him earlier lunges in from behind, and the guy's fear hits him like a punch. He spots her and blurts out, "Comet." Then she begs him to teach her how to hurl those fireballs, only for him to snap back that it takes his gift alone. She lets out a fierce scream, "Nothing is impossible for me." Roger yanks the girl off the hero's back and tells her to breathe like he's got enough problems already, and then they both refocus on the enemies getting treated right now, until a woman with a bucket comes marching up to them. Injured as they are, they yank themselves up, then a bucket dumps a nasty liquid over them and Guy howls, "It burns." The woman snaps back, "It's a potion for wounds, but it's filthy, packed with impurities." Guy shoots her a reproachful glare and, shaking in pain, insists a wounded man should be handled with real care. The woman spits it out like poison. He's a total pain, and that's why they're cutting him off. Then the girls and the guy glare at her with pure disgust as Rent suddenly closes in. They whip their heads toward the guy standing there clutching the piggy bank, then back off in pure fear, while he flashes a confident grin and declares, "I'm one." He tells everyone that, per the agreement, he's bumping the rate up by 10%. The opponents start grumbling that they're never paying a dime more than what they already spent. Then, right then and there, a brutal discharge rips through them, and agony makes them choke and wheeze. The observers swear the oath and the duel can't be broken, mess with it, and Liv's fate is sealed. Guy stares at Rant with a cloudy veil over his eyes and murmurs that he gets it. Guy keeps blurting over and over that he's finally figured everything out. Rent clamps the piggy bank in both hands and fires off a spell to stretch the contract, and right at the back of the opponent's neck, the darkness starts to glow. A mark burns into his neck, then the guy grins and says, "Come 7th month, I'll reclaim the 90,000 I borrowed, but it won't cover it." Rent snaps back, "They've got just 9 days to cough up 53,139 units, and yes, with interest." The hero clocks the gasping crowd and says, "Even if the three of you recharge the magic with those bracelets, you're still short by about 38,000. Rent snaps his head away and orders them to chug potions to cover the gap. Elle bursts out that they're basically broke, and Guy gets even more furious. As he storms off, Rent shoots back confidently that they'll have to chug around 77 bottles, while the knight yells that potions don't grow on trees. Then Missy asks what happens if they can't make it. Rent coolly warns that if things go that way, it's over for them. Then he shuts them down, saying he's not here to offer advice, and that as debtors they can't touch him, the creditor. The guy flashes the truth, "It's all my skill." And Gaia clenches her jaw, finally getting why the hero never blinked when those attacks came flying. Right in front of everyone, Rent declares that the heroes have only 10 days to do everything, or they'll never pay him back, and the others just stay silent. The opponents stare at him with tense eyes, insisting this isn't the end. After the hero and his crew smash their victory, they cram into a tavern, mugs clinking like a victory drum. Then the guy who'd wagered their rent leans in, thanking him like he just saved his life, only for the hero to frown, wonderstruck, thinking, "Yeah, but what if I'd failed?"
What?
Right then, a crowd steps in to congratulate him. Two-headed silver wolf, led by a white-haired guy and his armored girl, who marches up and greets the hero with confidence. He realizes he never even knew they were in Nalba, and when they explain they came on a mission, the girl cuts in. She says they've been in the same carriage as his duelists. The boy insists no, just like the rumors claimed. The girl snaps back that they're outright rude. Then they spill the truth, "We've never seen B-class adventurers butcher orcs like that before." Two girls on his team pounce and ask if he won, then brag that they did, and they demand he prove it too, wanting to see him win. But the guy in front of them stumbles, embarrassed, because he insists Rent is the real star tonight and they've got to hear a victory speech. He starts telling them about the day he got kicked out of his old squad, pure despair. But somehow fate threw him loyal friends, and that's how he rebuilt his life as an adventurer, and everyone leans in, hanging on every word. The guy bows and shyly leans in and tells him she's counting on their support and understanding. For one breath, everything goes silent. Then voices explode from every direction, rallying around him, telling him to stop fearing his opponents and begging for one thing, that they'll become friends. Roger cracks that the guy is hilarious to the black-haired girl, and she just smirks back, "It's just like you." Rinka and the hero lock eyes for a beat, then the girl flashes a sweet little smile. Renton and Rinka sit apart at the table, and she looks him in the eye to thank him for everything, while the fairy grins and declares that she was right all along, even when she had doubted his victory. The fairy basically figures the enemy's pride finally cracked after that crushing defeat, and the boy secretly hoping the same thing. Rinka says he was amazing, but she admits she was a bit terrified too. Then Rent rushes in to apologize. She still remembers when he swore he'd lost his memory. Then the guy admits he was warned that rage had gotten so out of control it stole his mind. Rent's grin drops. He goes dead serious and admits he doubts it's true because he vividly remembers getting hit by an emotion that wasn't anger, and it all comes back to the piggy bank. He said it felt like a whole other personality had taken over, pure malice in every word. The girl stares at that claim, stunned, and the fairy grins slyly at her while the sky outside starts to darken fast. Rinka slashes through bloodthirsty monsters with her sword, and Rent dashes in just to shout praise at her. Then she spins around, eyes sharp, saying this isn't the end and that she's gotten stronger. Right then, a bullet rips into the girl's side. Her eyes go wide in pure shock. A horrifying monster strikes, an undead-looking human skeleton with 4 twisted limbs. And when the girl drops, the guy panics and blurts out her name. While he sits on his bed at night in his room, all of it comes crashing back. Then the fairy leans in and asks what happened, and he blurts that the memories just stormed into his head. She figures it was pure rage, and Rent can't forget it either, because Rinka tore through a wave of goblins and battled on while her mind was unraveling. He figures their weird powers are way too dangerous, but the fairy snaps back that there's nothing to fear. Everything hinges on how they use them, and they've got her to help, while the girl quietly clocks just how scared he looks. He swears his fear isn't real. They snap into a short argument and then, boom, everything goes quiet when a knock rattles the door. He swings the door open, and there's Rinka standing in a tight black suit, and she blurts out an apology for the late call. They plop onto his bed side by side, and she admits she's haunted by nightmares every single night. The girl straight up admits it. Ever since him, she feels herself leveling up day after day. Rinka shudders the second she remembers the day a skeleton shattered her sword, and that terrifying moment won't leave her head. He shoots back that he crushed his fears his own way in that duel, and from how his old comrades moved, he realized they never want to come back to magic. Rent swears that in just 10 days it'll all be done, and now it's time to stand by Rinka as she battles her fear. He promises her she'll crush that skeleton. The day finally hits and they spill into the city. Rinka stops cold, stares at the flower beds, and blurts out, "They're beautiful." Right beside her, the cat girl blurts out that Melba is a city where travelers from everywhere roll in, and where you can buy seeds for every kind of flower, including the gremolata and the morning glory Melba is famous for. Rinka grins and points it out. One blooms at morning, the other lights up in the evening. So she splits the flower beds by bloom time, and the girl can't help asking starry-eyed how she guessed it and how she somehow knows all this. Right now, the main character barrels in wearing a brand new outfit, calls his name, and flashes a warm greeting to Rinka, then blurts out that she's sorry she's late. And slung over his shoulder, a belt with a piggy bank hanging from it. He asks the girl, "Do you need fresh armor?" She snaps back that she's tried it all, then he nods when she says the armor she's wearing feels like the most comfortable one for a hero. Then a tiny girl darts up to them and blurts out, asking if they're hunting armor, and when the heroes hesitantly say yes, she spots the katana hanging at Rinka's side. The girl can't stop wondering if she's meant to be a samurai. Then she grabs his hand and he yanks her aside, shouting that they have to head to their store. The kid tugs Rinka along, yelling that they've got every perfect product made for her, and the cat girl grins, saying Suzu's still just as wild and active as ever. They end up inside the Yagu store, surrounded by mind-blowing stuff, and the hero blurts that he's never, ever seen anything like it before. The girl beams and greets them again, like she's been waiting for this moment all along. The kid blurts out that this shop sells goods from the Far East. Then the hero examining the vase suddenly steps in and finishes the sentence for her, cutting her off mid-speech. Rinka slips on a samurai helmet, then asks the girl, "So, what do you think?" The kid spots the helmet, the one worn by the shogun, the top samurai of them all, and the girl awkwardly blurts that it's way too heavy. As soon as she lifts it, it sways side to side and the helmet smacks into the tanuki sculpture. The girl stares stunned at the wreck in front of her, and Rinka floods her with frantic apologies, while Suzu insists it's all good because they've got a spare. Yet the guy clearly doesn't buy it. The girl thrusts a vessel at him, swearing it'll sap the enemy's will to fight, then flashes dumplings that knock them out cold once they bite. Because the whole deal looks terrifying and it freaks him out hard. He mutters unsure that it's time to go, then Suzu suddenly hooks him by the waist. The girl snarls that nobody walks out for free. Then she slides a mask into the rental booth and tells her it'll make him dance better than anyone at the party. Right then, the guy screams at Rinka to get out. She stands by a gorgeous cape draped on the wall, staring at it like it's magic. Then Rent calls out to her again. She stares at the floral patterns on it, and then someone from the side leans in and tells her, "That's a kimono." A man bursts out from the back room and immediately recoils. This cabinet is a nightmare splattered with blood, and the fabric is barely there. He steps closer and tells the girl, "It's thin, but if you push magic through it, it'll harden into real armor." The girl stares at it, completely blown away. The man welcomes the heroes, then deadpans that they haven't had customers in ages, before the kid steps in and says, "I brought some." He scolds her, saying she's been using force again, and she snaps back that at least she's doing something. Then the seller turns his gaze to Rinka. He spots the girl's katana, then leans in and asks if she's a samurai. Rinka shuts him down and he fires back, "So what's a samurai anyway?" The man says these aren't just fighters from the Far East. They're warriors built for close-quarters brawls, swinging katanas to slice their opponents down. He spots their gear, kimonos, and for a moment he's hit by the memory of how he once fell for their beauty, so he carries it here. Rinka suggests they might fight in the same style, and Rent practically bursts with excitement, asking the girl if the gear will match her stuff. She nods yes and then asks what it costs. The man smirks and says, "Rough estimate, $2.5 million," and the girl just freezes, stunned by the number. Suzu yells that this is exactly why he won't buy a single thing from them, and the man fires back that if it weren't so rare, he'd drop the price. Then Rinka cuts in, saying they literally can't afford it. Rent demands to know if that armor's really worth the price, and the guy swears it's the finest fabric they can get, backing up every bit of its quality. He slams a huge bag of money onto the counter and declares he's taking it, and the girl blurts his name in pure shock. The hero declares that Rinka will wear the best armor, insisting it's a small price to pay for the protection. And before she can protest, he shuts her down with a grin. If they need it, they'll rake in money in the dungeon. Then he adds that he noticed how she looked in the kimono. He's convinced it was love at first sight. Then Rinka's cheeks explode with embarrassment as she scrambles to find the words. The kid yells that, as their top customer, he's getting a mask as a gift, and the man beckons Rinka to come with him as they push deeper into the store. They tumble into a backyard, and the girl gets a wooden sword on the spot. The man grins, says it's been ages since he got orders like this, and challenges her to a spar, because a fight means he can tailor her kimono to fit her moves just right. Rent leans in and asks the girl if her dad is tough. She nods and says, at least he gets something out of it, while Rent's head spins with worry. If she's only ever battled monsters, how's he supposed to know everything will be okay? He wonders if beating a human could light a fire under Rinka. Then the man snaps into a fighting stance. The brawl erupts right from the first second. They brace themselves and the man snaps, "We're starting." Rent and Suzu stare at tensely as he rockets forward, his first brutal lunge aimed straight at Rinka. He lunges for her shoulder, and she whips out of the way with deadly precision. She snaps into a counterattack, and the man just barely blocks it. The boy and the child keep their eyes locked on the fight, hanging on every second. They keep clashing non-stop, blow after blow, while Rent points out that the girl's father is seriously skilled, and she fires back that Rinka is a damn good fighter too. After that brutal hit, the man snaps at the girl to stop holding back and unleash the power she's been hiding. She fires one attack after another, and the man can only barely keep up by parrying every single strike. He thinks she's already quick enough, but she hasn't shown her real colors yet, so he lifts his sword. The seller swings in with a crushing hit, but the girl snaps up a solid block just in time. Her whole body shakes and then it hits her. This fight isn't a game anymore. Her face hardens, her mood flips, and the man can feel it instantly. She turns up the heat, striking harder and landing every move with ruthless precision. Rent clocks the fear in her face, spits out curses, and can't hide his worry, while the girl still has no clue what just happened. Rinka charges in with a crushing strike, and the man just grins like it's nothing. The man slashes the attack aside and lands one brutal strike, sending the girl's sword flying from her hands. Her katana whips up over her head, then crashes to the ground, and she stares at her fighting partner, stunned. The boy and Suzu stare in stunned awe at what's going down, while Rinka is still trying to piece it all together. Then the seller rushes in, apologizing for snapping at her. Out of breath, the man gasps that if they'd kept going like this, it would have turned into a fight to the death. Rinka blurts an apology, but the shopkeeper waves it off, "Don't worry." He tells her it was a gorgeous fight, then leans in and asks what her gift is. Without hesitation, she says, "The Way of Asura." That name hits him like lightning, because he knows that style is named after a deity. The man cracks the ice by introducing himself as a 21st generation Yagu, Lindo, then leans in and asks for her name, and she answers politely without hesitation. After mulling it over, the salesman tells her he finally knows the perfect product for her, and she smiles, thanks him, and they head back inside the house. There they spot a whole wall of fabrics, and the man leans in asking which patterns she loves. She lights up and says she's crazy about flowers. She asks if he's got any floral designs, bold ones, not sweet, fragile little patterns, and he pauses to think, then pulls out a fabric blazing with a fiery red floral print, telling her that in the language of flowers it means courage. Suzu takes the girl's measurements and blurts that she's insanely strong, way stronger than her own dad's ever been, and the girl clocks his sharp, fencing-like presence and asks if he's a master with the sword. Suzu grins and says it's just his hobby. She says that when he was young, he got taken on as a kimono apprentice, trained inside the warrior's dojo who wore his designs, and that's where his real skill was forged. Suzu clocks that his gift is fire magic, and the guy tells him it'll come in handy for making fires, while the girl leans in, listening like it matters most, and the child slips out the truth. She's got only 5 years left before her coming-of-age ceremony. Suzu can't stop thinking about what she'll get, and she makes her wish loud and clear. She wants a gift tied to trade. Rinka and the guy stroll down a crowded city street, and Rent tells him everything will be ready in just one day. She's buzzing with excitement, and the hero finally turns to her. He asks if she loves flowers, because during fabric shopping she had this big reaction to them, and she's even been chatting with people about flower beds. With a dreamy little smile, she admits she used to swear she'd grow up to be a florist, and the guy just stares at her, blown away. She tells him that back in her hometown there was this amazing flower shop, and every bloom instantly lifted her spirits. So she decides she can make her customers feel that same joy and light up their days with beautiful flowers. She still aches over the fact that, at the come-of-age ceremony, she had to surrender her dream. Renka realizes that wishing doesn't always get you the gifts you want, and that she could chase her dream with her gift, if that voice hadn't stolen the path from her. She swears a voice in her chest keeps roaring that she has to defeat the enemy and fight, but when she tries to shut it out, pain starts pounding in her head. He stares at her with pure regret, and she realizes her gift has dragged her through pain, but also wrapped her up in joy. She swears she picked this up from renting it. The girl finally admits she's terrified of facing her old enemy, but she knows she can't keep hiding. She's done running. She fires off a confident declaration. This is her destiny, and she's going to follow it no matter what, and Rent backs her up with a grin. He swears no matter what that he's the real creditor, and he'll hunt her down to the ends of the earth until she pays back every last debt. Right then, in some rickety tavern, a huge bag of money crashes to the floor right in front of two men. It's Gaius who orders the assassins. He drops 100,000 gold on them up front and promises another 10 million later. Then one of the men finally blurts out, "Who are we supposed to kill?" Hiding behind the knight, Misei blurts his name and roasts him as a total moron, even as a battered piggy bank swings on his belt. The man spots his name and blurts, "So you're the one who just beat up the 3 B-class adventurers, right?" Then he leans in and demands he tell him who did it. He's reminded that these guys are the losers from Unlimited Sky, so Guy snaps with indignation and the men laugh it off, bragging that they're famous just in the worst way. The men admit they do the dirty work, but they're sharp enough not to clash with Meteor Shower, and they make it crystal clear the whole group is moving in behind him. Milla snaps that they're weaklings and grabs the bag, yelling she'll find someone else, but one of the men lunges in and intercepts it, claiming this is payback for turning down their services, while the other threatens to spread the word about their order to everyone. He snatches up the bag, shouts to the whole tavern that the sword of the boundless sky is hunting revenge, and demands 100,000 gold. Then every single head whips around to stare at him. They get laughed at, mocked to their faces, and told the duel's revenge is pathetic. Then Guy is trembling with pure rage while Misei shoves him away and tells him to leave. They burst into the room. Guy snaps, kicks a chair, and spits poison at the mercenaries. Elle points out they never did the job, just pocketed the money. The knight scoffs that back then they'd have torn them apart. Misei shoots back that it's impossible for them now. Elix starts yelling plans for what they should do now since that money's all they've got, and she snaps that they can't even afford a room. Guy tells her they'll have to work the dungeon. Misei admits they already sold everything, and Guy points to the bracelet on his hand like it explains everything. He offers to sell the jewel, and the black-haired girl snatches hers, refusing outright because that thing can buy them 3,000 units of magic. Guy presses back. Do you really care that much about it? He glances at everything, grinning, then snaps, "We need money now, because with the cost of this rare beast, we could stock up on hundreds of potions." The shop appraiser eyes them for a second, then slams down the verdict, 6,000 gold. Misei and Guy start firing off arguments over the price, and the guy refuses to believe them, claiming it's nothing but a cheap bracelet. Meanwhile, Elle lets out a tired sigh, grumbling that she's starving, and with only 8 days left, rent is about to come due.